Good evening, everyone. I'm noting the time and the presence of a quorum. I'm going to call us to order. So I now call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope everyone had a restful break. We're well into budget season, so here we go. I wanted to do a check-in quickly. This is the time of year where we check in with members whose terms are expiring this spring. If you don't have to, if you haven't made a decision yet, no pressure to say if you're going to run again or not, but we'll do a check-in at this point to see what is happening with the upcoming election. So, Mary, you want to start?
Did you put us in a row on purpose?
Oh.
So I will not be running again. So if there's anybody from Boxborough who wants information, I'd be happy to meet for coffee, talk about it. But yeah, I've chosen not to run again.
Eileen?
I didn't make my mind at this point yet. Okay.
So you're still thinking about it?
I'm sorry?
You're still thinking about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I collected my papers today.
You did?
I do
Oh.
plan to run.
Okay. Yep. So I believe February 1st is the deadline for pulling papers in Acton. You have a little bit more time in Boxborough. So if anyone, encourage people to run. There are 2 seats open in Acton. So thank you. I also wanted to note that I am planning for us to go back to the auditorium for one more meeting to give it another try. This will be our March 21st meeting. So we're going to set that up, and then after that, hopefully we can make a final decision about whether or not we're going to move over to the auditorium or stay here. I'm going to move to item number 3, public participation. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak to us on items not on our agenda this evening, now is the time to do so. We welcome your participation and your comments. Okay, seeing none. Move to item 4, student representative update. Hi, Michael. Thank you for coming.
Okay. So I noticed it's budget week. I'll try to keep it brief as usual. Is the mic not on? Or do I just have to talk into it? Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay. No, I'm good. Anyways, for all intents and purposes, the term 2 ended yesterday. There's a mandatory 2 days for review for mid-years, which happen next week, Monday through Thursday, barring snow, in which case we push it back. This is a week earlier, by my recollection, from the traditional days for mid-years. I believe that was done to make sure there were less tests after the new year, but before mid-years. I'm not sure how well that's actually happened. I mean, I can't speak to that, is what I'm saying. But yeah, that's really just a generally stressful time for high schoolers. Mid-years carry a lot of weight, and people pretty much need to study for that. That's happening now. I mean, for some subjects, parts of the mid-year are being given out now, pretty much. And that's more or less the most dominant thing on the high schooler's mind around now. I've noticed a lot of interest both in our community and the Barter community regarding the schedule change, which happened a little bit before, actually before break. As I was standing here talking, I checked the timestamp. So they sent out an email, which the contents of which you guys actually got to see in November, I believe, November 15th. It just a brief summary of, for those who don't remember, it goes from 8 periods in a day to 6 periods in a day. It rotates, and lunch goes back to being split, which I believe is how they do it at the junior high. One aspect that I don't think was presented out here, they are de-emphasizing mid-years, which I just talked about, and finals to be summative assessments that can count for no more than 12.5%, I believe, of a grade. Right now they count for 20. And they're giving teachers more leeway to decide what to do with that, or whether or not I believe to do them at all. It's up to departments and teachers to decide. In general, I think after the announcement was made, there was a lot of confusion and discussion, and I think even admin would admit maybe the rollout wasn't the smoothest it could have been. Just one example of that, there's an online petition around there with over 1,000 signatures, which I believe are from students, but I haven't gone through and checked all of them. I think there was just a lot of confusion and a lot of things that the admin has tried to clear up. We've had forms that where Mr. Dory and the administration have been sort of pitching their plan, for lack of a better way to put it, over both the week before break and on Tuesday. One big area of concern, let's call it, for students was the shortened lunch period. It would go from, currently it's a full period of 45 minutes to anywhere from 31 to 36. That wasn't very popular. Many students use that time to de-stress. It's your only unscheduled time of the day. They get some work done. Many teachers use part or all of that time to allow students to make up tests or provide extra help. Admin has announced that they're going to push that back. They promised pushing that back to 44 minutes. It's currently unclear how that will happen. The last update I got from Mr. Dory just said, quote, "We're working on it." But in general, I think we do have that trust that they're working on it. And I think going back to the appointment of Mr. Dory, I think it's clear that that trust is there. I mean, this issue after the new year, I think pretty much has died down. Now, how much of that is due to admin getting out ahead of it and addressing the concerns? How much of it is just due to having 10 days off from school? I can't exactly say. But it's become less of an issue, and I think the schedule's happening, and even those who may be dubious of certain assumptions that the administrations are making, are more or less willing to give it a shot now, the vast majority of students. If there's any questions, I guess I'll take them. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Item 5 on the agenda, we have some warrants. There are 7 warrants. They're now being circulated, so we can sign them and pass them on. Vendor warrants 19-013, 013, 19-014, 19-014, Let me start that again. I'm so sorry. Okay. We have 7 warrants on the agenda. Vendor warrants 19-013 and 013 PR, 19-014 and 014 PR, and 19-014 SH, which is the high school student activities, in the total amount of $3,773,894.43. And we have 2 payroll warrants, 1913 and 1914, in the total amount of $5,197,564.01. In your packet, you will find the minutes from our December 13th meeting. I hope you've had an opportunity to look them over. Do I hear a motion to approve? Okay. Any amendments, changes? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes.
All right, Happy New Year, everyone. So I have a few updates for you. First, you have a memo in your packet, but I just wanted to speak a little bit about the high school principal update. So as you know, at our last meeting, I updated you that I was considering appointing Mr. Dory as the permanent principal of the high school. In December, I had an opportunity to meet with interested stakeholders as part of a process, and I also received several emails with feedback about Mr. Dory. I'm pleased to report that after completing the process, I have appointed Mr. Dory to this position. Prior to vacation, I sent a communication to families and staff regarding the appointment, and that's actually the memo you have in your packet. Mr. Dory is a student-centered leader with high emotional intelligence and integrity. I'm confident he's going to be an outstanding principal for our high school. Congratulations to Mr. Dory on the well-earned appointment. Second update I have for you is we have an administration office art show coming up. I'm very excited about this, and I hope you can stop by. We've been working with Leo Muehlner, who is our visual arts director, to host a student art exhibit in the lobby of our newly renovated space in the administration building. We expect that the artwork is going to be hung over the course of the next week or so. I would encourage you to stop by our offices to see the incredible work our students do. I would also like to thank Mr. Muehlner, Deb Bookus, all of our art teachers, and especially our students for helping to make our space a beautiful one. Building project update, a few things. Last night was a big night for us. Last night, the building committee had an opportunity to review the most recent information regarding site options for the Douglas Elementary School project. The committee reviewed a variety of information which can be accessed on the building project website, which is right on the homepage of our school department website. After much deliberation of the options to consider for the preferred schematic design submission, the committee voted unanimously to move forward with options on the Gates site for a consolidated school building with two separate educational programs for the Gates and Douglas Elementary Schools. Over the coming month, the building committee will continue to evaluate whether this should be a single or two-phase project and how that will be most appropriate for our community. Additionally, our architect will continue to refine the design of the school prior to the next MSBA submission deadline, which is for the Preferred Schematic Report, or PSR, on February 20th. I just want to make you aware, as part of the MSBA's response to our first submission, which was the PDP. There's lots of acronyms that go around with MSBA. One of the things they ask us to do is to provide them with documentation that the committee supports consolidating two separate school buildings into one facility. So at our next meeting, we're going to be asking you to vote to offer your support for the consolidation of the Douglas and Gates schools into a single school building, obviously with the exception that the schools will continue to be maintained and operated as two distinct educational programs. The results of that vote would be submitted to MSBA with the PSR, back to that acronym, on February 20th in support of the project. The last update I have for you is actually regarding my entry process. I've tried to give you about a monthly update just with regard to the entry process, so this is the last of the intermittent updates coming. At this point, I've completed the first phase of the entry process, and that was done in early December. I've been reviewing a lot of that data to develop my draft report of entry findings. Over the next couple of weeks, I'll be sharing the draft report with members of the leadership team in order to test and verify my findings and ensure that the report accurately reflects the work of the district. While the report is rooted in data that includes stakeholder feedback, a review of district documents and data analysis, and many hours of school and classroom observations, the findings reflect the data as I see them through my own professional judgment. I look forward to presenting it to you at our next regularly scheduled meeting on February 8th. I don't want to give away too many of the details of what's in the report, but I can certainly share with you that I continue to be incredibly impressed with the work of our faculty and administrators, particularly in responding to students' social emotional needs, as well as increasing equitable opportunities for students. As a small preview of some of the other major themes of the report, I do expect to talk with you about the increasing diversity of the district, efforts to promote the most inclusive culture possible for our students, and opportunities to continue our work in supporting students' social emotional growth and mental health. While there is much more to the report, I wanted to provide you with just a small peek into what you can expect to hear about at our next meeting, and I will not be offering more details now, no matter how many questions you ask. As a reminder, the report is really actually the beginning of the next step in the process, which is continued work with the leadership team and you in order to discuss the findings of the report and then use those findings as a means to grow and expand our current district strategy for improvement. I expect that second step of that work to span throughout the spring, summer, and into the fall. So thank you very much, and that is the superintendent's report for tonight.
Okay, moving right along. Item 7 is the FY20 Superintendent's Preliminary Budget. We have a series of speakers who will come to the podium to present to us.
So as Dave is coming to the podium to kick us off, we have been working with both communities to refine our budget as we go forward. Also, some of the numbers that we put into the budget, they become more updated as we get additional information throughout the budget process. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave to give you an overview of some of the changes that have taken place. And then we have a series of presentations for you. I think the most important part of this is 7.7, which is at the end of the presentation schedule. And, we really want to make sure that we invite you to give us some feedback, ask questions. I think over the next 2 weeks as we prepare for Budget Saturday, your feedback tonight is going to be very helpful for us to make sure that we're accurately reflecting your priorities in the budget, that if you have questions that maybe we can't even answer tonight because it requires some more in-depth research, we can certainly do that research prior to Budget Saturday and make sure we're prepared with that information. But the most important thing to me coming out of tonight is to make sure that I understand what questions, concerns you might have around the budget so that we can continue to work as a leadership team to refine that prior to the 26th. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Dave.
Okay, oh, he was tall. Members have received the crystal reports, which is the budget line item detail reports. There's 2 sets. There's by character code, which are the natural expenses, the expense types, and the administrative responsibility, which is how the budget is developed by administrator. You have also got several pages of my analysis of the admin variances, and the Budget Saturday binder will have my analysis of the character code variances, the expense types, and that'll be available next week. Typically, the first meeting in January, I've been here 2 years now, so is to represent the coming year's budget. Since December 6th, when Peter presented the preliminary budget, there have only been a few changes, but there have been significant financial impact on the FY20 budget and, of course, the assessment. So I have a brief PowerPoint to explain the changes, and here we go. We're calling this, just to get the nomenclature right, we're calling this the recommended budget, all right? And as we go from iterations, the name takes on some meaning. This is intended to be the budget that's presented on Budget Saturday. Changes to the preliminary budget, there are basically 3 categories. One is expenditure changes. You see the December 6th presentation was $91,111,000. Not going to rehash that. That's what Peter presented over a month ago now. But a couple of changes in expenditures. We had additional teacher retirements become known since that budget was prepared and before the deadline, which I believe was December 31st. It might have been December 15th. And that accounts for about $69,000 in savings. The new teachers projected to be hired at a reduced cost from the retirees. Additionally, the preliminary budget carried a provision to allow for 3 additional buses next year. I think Peter went into that. Based on the study that was done, their recommendation said we should have 2 buses. 2 would be the most cost-effective addition to alleviate some of the concerns that have been raised this year. They said to do it perfectly would require something like 87 more buses. Actually, I think it was more like 7 or 11, something like that. But the recommendation has been tempered from 3 additional buses to 2, or a savings of $60,000. Those are the 2 budget changes, and so the recommended budget as of tonight, and this has been communicated to ALG, to the Boxborough at last Saturday's meeting, and to Budget Subcommittee at our last meeting, is $90,982,000, or a 2.55% increase over the prior year. 2 other categories of the changes. The first relates to revenues. We're going to assume a $30 per pupil increase in minimum Chapter 70 aid. We had budgeted $20 per student in the preliminary budget. A few years ago, it had been level funded from year to year. It seems as though, and I did the math, the 6-year average for minimum aid is like $31. And so we feel comfortable that when the governor's budget is released in about 2 weeks, we should hope for a $30 minimum aid increase. We don't get any significant amount of Chapter 70 aid because we're way beyond the threshold at which our enrollment alone would cause our aid to go up. And a smaller piece is that for years the district has not budgeted for miscellaneous revenue, things like E-rate reimbursements, things like that are typically one-time, non-recurring, sometimes out-of-the-blue revenues, and yet we actually take in $10,000 to $15,000 a year. So I've provided a $10,000 estimate for miscellaneous revenue. That brings the total for revenues to about $17.5 million. And the last category is additional use of E&D reserve. We had preliminarily budgeted the use of $450,000, $200,000 the traditional amount that has historically been used, $250,000 representing the increase in the capital budget from $1 million to $1,250,000. And the third piece is, go back to what I was saying 3 minutes ago about the additional buses. If we're going to add 2 buses at a cost of $120,000, there will be state reimbursement once those costs are reported to the state, which lags because the aid is a reimbursement program. So for the first year, there's no reimbursement, and so Peter proposed that we take an additional $60,000. 50% of the costs is generally what we see in transportation aid reimbursement from E&D. That will be supplanted by the actual Chapter 71 aid that we receive in the following year. So E&D recommended use is now $510,000. So those are the 3 categories. That's all the changes that were made. And as you saw, the big number is the budget, $90,982,000, and there are the sources to defray the cost of that budget. Any questions to this point? There should be one more question. So the budget is funded by revenues and use of E&D, and then ultimately the assessment to the member towns. And here's the impact of what I've told you to this point on the assessments. And again, these numbers have been shared with both towns. The recommended budget revenues, E&D, are from the previous slides that I've mentioned. The net change from all of that, $254,000. What's the impact on the assessments? For Acton, it goes from $61,591,000 to $61,387,000. Boxborough, about a $50,000 reduction. And noteworthy, the increase to Acton is a little less than 2.1%, 1.75% to Boxborough. From my view, participating in some of the meetings, that's been very well received by the member towns as being shall we say, small. The cost shift is unchanged, $425,000 cost shift from Acton to Boxborough. This is the last significant year of that. For FY21, the shift will be $25,000 and then zero after that. It'll all be based on enrollment going forward.
So that's the other way.
Cost shift. The cost, I guess it's how you look at it. I view the cost as being borne by Boxborough, but you understand the mechanics. Boxborough pays $425,000 more than they otherwise would based on enrollment. And so here are just some quick stats. What we projected last year and the preliminary budget and the recommended budget, just to show in dollars and percentages, and I'm not going to read them, you can see the numbers, but the news has gotten better fiscally for both of the member communities. As I said, this is the plan for Budget Saturday, but And here's the outline of the schedule. The numbers are subject to change. As Peter said, we're looking for school committee's input, and the numbers could change before Budget Saturday and potentially after Budget Saturday, before the school committee takes its vote. And I think I may have the dates wrong. I think you're going to be discussing tonight potential calendar change, but that's what I had at preparation of this slide. So, any questions?
Michael?
I have a question. I do understand the cost efficiency about the school bus. From the Saturday, bus bar Saturday, what I heard was the 3 buses, right? Was it? Or because today we got the numbers 2 buses, 2 additional buses instead of 3 additional buses.
So I'll just summarize you're actually just about to hear from the operations department about the report that we commissioned to do this. I don't want to steal their thunder, but it essentially came back saying we could either add 11 buses, 7 buses, or 2 buses. We had originally budgeted for 3 in the superintendent's preliminary budget back in December, because I think there has to be some limit to how much we really want to spend on school bus transportation. And we wanted to alleviate some of the stress on the system, but not overspend for yellow buses. So we certainly were not in a position to feel comfortable at putting 7 buses in that. We're already a very, very large transportation system by any measure. So I think 2 buses felt more comfortable to me, and so that's what I wanted to include in this budget. So we have gone from 3 to 2, and then you'll hear more about the reasons behind that in a minute.
Angie?
Because this is, just have a general question in terms of the process of putting a line item on the budget. I'm using this just as an example. There's one is Anti-Defamation League Award of Difference. So for example, I'm just using that as an example, something like that, what is the process to make it up to the budget? Because I believe there must be a lot of different programs that's competing for the amount of money. And what is the process in terms of how we decide what program that we're going to adopt in the district and all that?
So I see my boss about to answer, but I'm going to anticipate his answer and say, this will give you a glimpse of how the budget is developed generally, because this is an unusual item. It's a new item, but this is not going to be unlike how the whole expense budget gets developed, what I anticipate him saying.
Okay.
So as I was coming into the district at the end of last year, there were a series of bias-based incidents that had occurred in the district over the last year, and some had drawn significant media attention. Others were, local issues that parents were concerned about, students were concerned about, administrators were concerned about. And we started meeting with some community organizations around how we might be able to work with the community to respond to some of that and be proactive in our approach. As I was coming into the district, in meeting with the leadership team, we recognized that a lot of work has been done with our adults around anti-bias education and professional learning. So we have the SEED program, which you've heard about, the Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity program, but that's really an adult-focused program. What we realized is we didn't have a proactive student-focused program in that area. There are a few different programs around that you can adopt or use parts of around anti-bias, but the A World of Difference program, sponsored by the Anti-Defamation League, is a research-based program that has proven results. It's a program that I happen to also have some experience with in a prior district, having just implemented it. It has tremendous impact, and the school communities where it was implemented had very, very positive things to say about the impact it had on kids and the culture of the schools. We talked with Mr. Dory and the high school leadership team a little bit about that program as a possibility, and they had some interest in it. So the next step that we did this fall was to invite the World of Difference program in, and the Anti-Defamation League to come in and actually speak with the high school leadership team to be able, so that they could understand exactly what the program entails, understand the impact that it's designed to have on students, how that might work within a high school. The leadership team then took that back. They were able to discuss it as a team and ultimately came back to me and said this was something they were interested in moving forward with. We also had Andrew Shen involved, just so he, as a junior high school principal, was aware of how that might look. But we wanted to start by implementing it at the high school. So that was really the decision process. And as soon as the leadership team felt comfortable that's something they wanted to move forward with, we incorporated that into the budget.
To follow up, will this program include the kind of security proactively, something happen in the school? Is that included in this budget, or that's a totally separate thing?
Do you want to answer?
In the budget, you still on the, I don't think that's a security-based program.
No, this is, we have an entire security line item in the budget that's under the operations department, that's fairly substantial. That one item is specific to the World of Difference program for anti-bias educational opportunities for kids.
Okay, thank you.
We next?
Yep.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. JD Head, I'm the Director of School Operations, and I'm really going to save most of my time here for questions at the end. I'm sure there'll be plenty. I want to introduce Nicole Rogers. Nicole is from Greenman Peterson. It's a civil engineering firm. They have a GIS arm, and Nicole has been working with the district for about 2.5 years now, since we started the whole school start time conversation. And we commissioned her to run this analysis on the performance of the first few months of the operation since we've incorporated the single tier in the elementary and the school start time change. And I'm going to let her take it from there. Oh, please.
Just one additional comment, because I try to do this every opportunity I can. Early in the year, we promised you that when we had something that was related to the district's goals for the year, we would try and highlight that for you. One of the goals this year, under social emotional learning, was to evaluate the effectiveness of the single-tier transportation system, because that was implemented. So I just want to also be clear that the update you're hearing tonight is also in relation to updates you might have for the goals for the year.
So thank you, everyone. Like JD said, I'm Nicole Rogers. I'm with GPI. We're based out of Wilmington. So I'm here to talk about our third phase of work in regards to the district's transportation system. So before we kind of get into phase 3, just want to do a quick recap on phase 1 and 2 so everyone's on the same page. So phase 1, we were asked by JD in late 2016, so quite a long time ago, to just do an assessment of the previous 3-tier system and some improvements that we can make to convert to a 3-tier system. So the main takeaway points from that, the high school and junior high tiers, those were very overutilized, meaning that there weren't enough buses to safely service all the students in those tiers. And conversely, in the elementary tier, those routes were significantly underutilized. So there were about 50% of the elementary routes that had less than 40 students assigned to those buses. And that's just assigned riders, not people who are actually riding the bus, so very low. So if the district were to kind of continue working at that pace, they would need to nearly double their fleet in order to convert to the 3-tier system. So some proposed changes needed to be put into place. So some of those proposed practices to implement that we came up with were planning based on actual ridership, the removal of cul-de-sac service just so it's easier for buses to maneuver through the neighborhoods, the implementation of walk zones, and moving towards a cluster stop approach, and some others as well. Then in phase 2, we actually took those proposed transportation practices and put them into a full-scale model. We actually went through the routing software that the district uses, And we actually created all the routes, assigned students to these cluster stops. And then the district actually went out and did a simulation of the model to see how things were actually going to run real time. That was a success, and so here we are today, operating a two-tier system. So we've achieved a 44-minute high school start time delay, and all the elementary students are now on the same schedule. So phase 3 was kind of broken up into two different parts. First was doing an efficiency rating on the new two-tier system, and the second was just highlighting some areas that we could potentially see some improvements. So jumping right into the efficiency, capacity utilization is a huge part of that. The Acton-Boxborough buses can actually hold 83 students, but it's kind of bad practice to have all 83 on the bus at once. High school kids are a little bit bigger, elementary kids are loud, it's distracting to the drivers. So we decided to implement a 55 student capacity for high school tiers, and that means according to that 83 seat limit, we're looking at a 66% target utilization for high school tiers. Now for the elementary tier, these kids are a little bit smaller. You can fit more kids more comfortably in the bus, so that's a 65 student per bus target. So that adds up being to 78% target utilization. So before we kind of get into those calculated numbers, we wanted to see how many students are actually riding the bus. So a big part of that planning process was planning based on actual ridership rather than assuming that every kid rides the bus every single day. So the district performed ridership surveys. We saw that 64% of Tier 1, which is the high school, middle school, are riding the bus, and 73% of elementary students are riding the bus. And compared to the three-tier system, these numbers are really consistent, so that indicates that we haven't lost any ridership, which is always a good thing since the switch. So with those actual ridership numbers, we decided to implement a little bit of a buffer there just to account for any seasonal fluctuations. You know, more kids might ride the bus in the winter when it's cold and they don't want to walk to school. So just to recap, for the high school tier, we have a target bus capacity rate of 66%. So this represents that 55 student per bus capacity. So in this figure, the green on the left represents the three-tier system, which you can see was at 71%, and since the switch to the blue on the right, which is the existing two-tier system, we dropped down to about 60%. So you'll see that utilization is driven down to a healthier rate, and although it's a little bit below that target rate, that provides a little bit of flexibility for the system, provides any accommodation for student population growth over time. In the elementary phase, once again, the three-tier previous system is in green opposed to the blue on the right, which is the existing two-tier system. You'll see that before, the elementary tier was significantly underutilized. Since the switch, we've seen that utilization has been driven up to a much healthier rate. Once again, we're kind of right below that target rate, provides a little bit of more flexibility, more comfortable rides, and stuff like that. So from a capacity utilization regard, the system is kind of operating right exactly where we want it to be in terms of those district target rates, and it's operating with economic efficiency. Next, we decided to look at some of these stop performance measures. Like I said, with those proposed transportation aspects, we wanted to implement a walk-to-stop policy and thus move towards a cluster stop approach. So these two kind of go hand in hand. With the walk-to-stop, the district implemented a half-mile walk-to-stop distance for high school students and junior high students, and a quarter-mile for elementary. You'll see that there are approximately 200 students throughout the entire district that have a walk distance over that threshold. We decided to kind of dive into that a little bit further, like where are these students residing? We found that most of them reside at Avalon, or they're on really long cul-de-sac roads or dead-end roads that the bus no longer services due to maneuverability issues. But the main takeaway from that, in the high school tier, your average distance is approximately 600 feet from your home to stop and 500 feet in the elementary, so it's pretty good. Way below those maximum thresholds that we had implemented there. So with that walk-to-stop policy, that gave us the ability to incorporate a lot more cluster stops within the two-tier system. So in comparison to the previous three-tier, the high school routes are seeing a savings of approximately 2.8 minutes in stop time per route, which is huge. And in our elementary tiers, we're seeing that they can service on an average of 2 extra stops, nearly double the students that they were in the three-tier system. So that just indicates a huge efficiency increase there. So overall, the implementation of cluster stops, we see a 24% reduction in total stops. So that means buses aren't accelerating and decelerating as much. You're reducing your emissions, so it's a much more economic, efficient system and a greener system as well. Next, we kind of looked at some of the time performance measures. So is the system reliable? Can families, depend on the district to get their kids to and from school on time? So just as a recap, the district implemented a 45-minute maximum ride time. That's for transportation to or from school. These are some of the metrics that we pulled from TransFinder, which is the routing software. So we'll see that PM ride times are generally a little bit longer. We're averaging 20 minutes for high school and 26 minutes for elementary. And the key takeaway point from here is that 98% of all students are on the bus for less than 45 minutes. So when we look at that extra 2% that are exceeding 45, most of those kids are on crosstown buses. So Acton kids going to Blanchard or Boxborough kids going to Conant, anyone who's kind of in that school choice area. Next, we looked at home to bell time and then bell time to home, kind of seeing what is the whole transportation distance like for kids. And we saw that, this maxes out at an average of 37 minutes. So that includes all the loading, unloading, the whole route, and that's well below our 45 minutes, so kudos. We also looked at the on-time stop performance measures, and this was done using Synovia, which is the onboard AVL system of all the buses, so it provides real-time information coming back, so when that bus is actually opening their door and closing the door. So we were able to download a whole week's worth of data, kind of get a whole picture of things, how things are operating out there, and we checked for system-wide consistencies over a full week and saw that approximately 94% of stops are on time, 3% late, and 3% early. So in comparison to a lot of transit systems that strive for 80% on-time performance measures, this is excellent. And finally, we looked at what time are buses actually arriving to the school. So we saw that high school tiers, buses are arriving, well within their means. The elementary tier, as it's the second tier, things are a little bit more crowded and there's not much flexibility there. So we saw that 25% of the elementary routes are arriving within 5 minutes of the bell time, so between 8:45 and 8:50. So this kind of just suggests, in our opinion, to maybe push back the elementary tier about 10 minutes, provide a lot more flexibility for those routes to be completed in a decent amount of time. So from an efficiency standpoint, things are looking great. Utilization is right where it needs to be. The system is very reliable, and kids are getting to school on time and in a safe manner. So now we wanted to look at some additional kind of things that we could improve system-wide. One of those was separating Conant, Merriam, McTown route, which right now all those students are serviced on one routing group. So right now the travel time between those two schools is 13 minutes, and that's an ideal situation where there's no traffic, no construction. That's not happening every day. So 16% of those AM routes have ridership that exceeds that 65-seat limit, and 37% of those AM routes are arriving within that 5-minute window. So right now, there are 19 buses servicing that routing group in order to accommodate separated routes, so Conant being serviced independently and then the Parker-Damon building being serviced independently. You would need an additional 7 buses and 7 drivers to the fleet. So that comes with a price tag. In the first year, it's about $483,000 for those additional resources. After your state reimbursement in the second year, it's about $240,000. So your potential benefits, obviously, you're cutting back on some trip length there. The number of riders that are assigned is going to be less, so alleviating some of that overcrowding. Disadvantages, obviously, the price tag. Secondly, you have multiple buses routing through the same neighborhood, so they're going to get bunched up and, maybe the ride time isn't going to decrease. Also, in this scenario, you have less of a density of students, so you can't implement as many cluster stops. So you're kind of resorting back to the same system that you already had, which wasn't efficient. And also in this, if you had an additional 7 buses, they only need to be serviced to the elementary routing and not high school. So during the high school phase, these buses are just sitting somewhere, or you throw them into the high school and that drops down the utilization significantly. So in our opinion, we'd like to see that these routes stay combined to maximize the utilization. Ultimately, we need to decide if we want to balance, ridership with the trip length, which has been the challenge all along. So when your utilization excels, it kind of hurts your ride times, and when your ride times are, decreased to, 35 minutes, it hurts your utilization. So there's just, with the school choice aspect of things, there's too much geography to cover. Next, we looked at possibly reducing the maximum ride time from 45 minutes to 35 minutes. And just to recap, 98% of all students are already less than 45. When we looked at 35 minutes, 95% of high schoolers are less than 35, and 75% of elementary are less than 35. However, once again, you have to balance your ridership with your trip length. So if you have a less operating time to finish all those students, you can't service as many students per route now. So now you have to, add more buses to your fleet. So in order to do this, that would be an additional 10 buses and 10 drivers to the fleet. And that's under the assumption that Conant and Merriam would stay combined. So this comes with an even greater price tag of $684,000 in the first year, and second year after the state reimbursement, it's about $340,000. So potential benefits here, obviously your shorter rides and greater flexibility between routes, probably easing some tension for a lot of the drivers. Disadvantages, obviously the price tag again, and this would also significantly hurt the utilization. So once again, those 10 buses wouldn't be needed in the high school, and it would drop down those rates significantly. So when selecting a reasonable maximum ride time, we find that 45 minutes is pretty reasonable compared to other districts that have a 60-minute ride time. And considering the school choice aspect and the geography of things, 45 seems reasonable to us. But should, the committee decide that 35 is better, just more resources are needed. And then we were asked if one new bus and one driver were available tomorrow, where should that bus go? And likewise, if there were 2. So kind of throughout this whole process, we saw that the Conant, Merriam, and Town routing group was a source of inefficiency. So just the travel time between the schools themselves, schools arriving within 5 minutes, and some buses have more than 65 students on them. So therefore, it's recommended that it be, allocated towards that routing group, but where specifically? So we decided, sorry, this is a little hard to see up here, but we decided to plot all of our Merriam McTown students and all of our Conant students just to see where they are geographically. You'll see within that blue area, which in there, that represents a 0 to 5 drive time between the student and the home. So in that area, more students can be serviced within a less amount of time. So if you were to put a bus within those 2 yellow circles, you'll be able to service a lot more students, and there's also a high density of students from each school, so you'd be able to independently service those students, further reducing the ride time there. So that's kind of all I have right now, but overall efficiency is great, and the system is working very well in comparison to the previous 3-tier system. So any questions? Ask away.
So when we talk about the target, throughout this presentation, so we're assuming that we're going to need like 7 to 10 or 7 to 11 buses, additional buses, right? Or no?
What was that?
Because this year, the FY20, we're going to just add 2 additional new buses, right, into our recommended budget, right? So, but throughout this presentation, why, hear the terminology of target. So we are targeting, like, for example, maximum riding time, 35 minutes, right? That's our target, right? In the phase 3.
45 minutes.
45.
45 minutes.
35 is an exercise
To see what it would be. If you wanted to go to 35 minutes, you'd have 10 additional buses. And
10
drivers.
10 additional.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is just a lot.
But with 2 additional.
Yep.
So can we reach this at 45 minutes?
45 minutes with the 2.
Okay.
Well, we're already operating at a 45-minute. The 2 additional buses would just kind of improve efficiency system-wide and help some of those routes servicing Conant, Merriman, McTown.
Okay, so can you point me that in this presentation, what's the target improvement with this 2 additional?
So 2 additional buses for Conant, and
I can actually just jump in on that. So we tried a couple of different things. We wanted to start out globally by setting improvement targets to see what we could get to and how many buses we might need to add. And we wanted to start there. So we said, okay, ride time of 45 minutes. We still hear, as parents are adjusting to that, and certainly at the beginning of the year as families were adjusting to that ride time, that was certainly something that came up. As I was meeting with families and you were hearing the same thing from families. So we said, okay, if we wanted to change the 45-minute ride time downward to 35 minutes, what type of resources would it take? So that was one approach we wanted to take. The second one, what was the other target?
so the second one was separating, so right now Conant,
That's
Merriman,
right.
McTown students are
Thank
all
you.
serviced on one
Yeah.
and separating those routes.
So that was the second target, and the reason we chose that as a target is of all of the schools, the Conant and Miriam McCarthy Town students were struggling to get those students to school on time. And we have buses going to those 2 schools that are continually arriving late. And there are a couple of different factors that go into play with that. One factor that is at play is the number of buses and the number of students. It's just proving to be a challenge on that particular route, whereas with all of the other schools, we're getting kids consistently to school on time. The other challenge with that, though, is in order to serve both schools, half the buses have to drop their students at Conant first, then travel 13 minutes to McCarthy Town. Likewise, the other half start at McCarthy Town and then have to travel to Conant for that same amount of time. So that's a challenge as well. We probably won't be able to solve that aspect because they're always going to have to travel across. But what we wanted to do is see what we could feasibly put in place to be able to not split the routes because it wasn't cost effective to add 7 buses, but can we alleviate some of the stress on that system so that we can try to get those kids to school in a more time effective manner. So it was really about getting kids to school on time.
Right. I actually, I know that probably, just adding 7 buses into FY 20 budget probably is not that cost efficient, but I try to find out, with 2 additional, where can we get with this, because, we're talking about, 45 minutes right now, we are already on that target, right? And then 35 minutes was 7 to 10 additional buses, right? And then where can we get with the 2 additional? That's what I try to find out.
Okay, Paul?
I just wanted to thank you, Nicole, for presenting data, because for a number of months now, I've been hearing the anecdotes, and I was beginning to believe that the anecdotes were the data. And so this is giving me a perspective on the transportation that I needed to see. So I appreciate that. The question I do have is that you mentioned the targets of 66% and 78%. How were those targets derived? Or is that experience, or is there a formula?
Yep. So those were derived from here. So this is based on 55 students per bus in the high school. So the bus can hold 83 students. So if you divide 55 by 83, you get 66% target utilization. Yep.
So I guess my question is, 55 students then per bus?
Yep.
What's that based on?
That's like an industry standard for
Okay.
sure. 2 per seat for high school, and in the elementary, you can have like 2 to 3 in the front, and just based on the size of the kid, you know.
Did you have a question, Mary?
I think if we want to reduce beyond 45-minute bus rides, which seem to be pretty good comparatively, we have to have a serious conversation as a committee about school choice. It's school choice that drives those times, because somebody can come from the farthest end of Boxborough to the farthest school, or from the farthest end of Acton to the school in Boxborough. So that's something to consider before I think the 2 buses is fine for next year, but before we throw a lot more buses into the system, that's a conversation we should have.
Angie?
2 questions. Do we know the number of riders? Is there any change from the 3 to, is pretty much the same?
Pretty much right on target.
Okay.
Very consistent. It's maybe like 1% less in the elementary tier.
Okay.
I think it was
The second
74
question-
last year, and it's 73 this year.
The second question is in terms of the time, as you know that the numbers impact by traffic. Have we ever done any kind of, is that number include the traffic study that try to avoid certain route or intersection so we can make the ride shorter?
Yeah, so a lot of the GIS stuff that I've done, basically within the planning part of this and in phase 2, that all kind of takes in historical traffic data. So I'll kind of plan it around AM peak period to see which intersections to be avoided and which routes are, most cost effective and time effective.
Okay, Maya?
Thank you for a very thorough presentation. I also thought the packet was easy to read despite all the data at home. So it was really well laid out and very graphically clean and easy to comprehend. I wonder about the 45-minute ride time. Just curious, because I know in elementary school the kids have to line up and there's a first and second wave. So if you're on second wave, let's say, and you've had to wait for the bus, that's probably about 10 or 15 minutes additional to the 45?
Yep. We kind of did that home to bell and bell to home, so that kind of takes in all of that loading time. So it was, it maxed out at 37 for average. Yeah, so that kind of takes in all of that. So this slide here is the actual time on the bus. So that's from when the student loads the bus to when they get off the bus. And this is from when the student gets on the bus to the time the bell rings to start, and vice versa. So that's an average. Yeah. So that includes all that wait time,
So
all that loading time.
So there are kids that exceed the 45 minutes in this, just a small percentage?
2%.
2%.
Yep.
Okay.
The 2 buses, you said one of the longest ride times for, just besides the problems with the Conant and McCarthytown Miriam routes, the kids who are coming from Boxborough into Acton and from Acton to Boxborough,
Yep.
were those ride times more than 45 minutes, and is this impacted at all by the 2 buses?
So those 2% of the 98, here's a good graphic to look at right here. Right, so this represents the drive times for Blanchard, right? So all the students who live in that red area, they're going to experience long ride times, and it's just geographically, you have to balance that ridership with the trip length. So in order for the student all the way up in North Acton and all the way southeast Acton, you just kind of have to balance that, and there are going to be some kids who have ride times greater than 45 minutes, unless you add more resources.
What do we lose by not adding that 3rd bus, if anything?
Oh, please. One other thing about that too, I mean, the 45-minute, I think the longest was 47 I mean, we're talking about like a minute or two beyond that. So it's really hitting on that 45, and that's why really that 45 number's been here since I've been here. That's what it was, under 3 tiers, but it was, the general ed elementary especially system, because it was so underutilized, it was very easy to customize it. So it could be very customizable. You could have much more door-to-door service, and you had an awful lot of space on the bus. But we needed those same units to produce very crowded high school, junior high bus rides, right? So you're kind of always balancing those two populations. But the 2 buses, Maya actually was touching on something that the 2 buses might have the greatest impact on, is reducing that wait time at the school. Because ideally, if we can separate, basically what we're going to do is a bit of a hybrid Conant, McCarthytown, Merriam combo separation, right? So we're going to try and take a few routes that are all within those blue areas, separate those out, and have independent rides for Conant and independent rides for Merriam and McCarthytown, to try and reduce some of that queuing of buses that are waiting to queue, and hopefully that'll reduce a few minutes of load time for everyone across the board, because there's also footprint issues. I mean, those have been working on the building project and talking about driveways and loops and things like that. We're really kind of hitting it against the wind when we're trying to load buses sometimes, and 4 at a time. So I think that's the greatest benefit.
Okay, yeah, so what you're saying is that two is the number that will improve service in the routes that are most
right. I mean, it's
right
not
now.
going to be magic,
Yeah.
but I think that's the best, for lack of more science.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on. Oh, I'm sure, go ahead.
So just with respect to what Mary asked and sort of what Maya was asking, did you look, and we don't have to discuss it or share it now because it seems like it will be a bigger discussion further down the road if we end up talking about school choice, but my guess is that if you're looking at that slide of the Bell to home and home to Bell was an average, correct? So if you look at them I went to Conant as a kid. We did this. I remember the second tier where you're sitting for 10 minutes waiting for the bus to come. But I imagine it's kind of a stark difference between looking at Blanchard load times, Bell to home, and Conant Bell times. But you know what I'm saying? So I would imagine that if we ever get to the point where we're looking to make that argument or something else, that laying it out by school to show what it looks like when you have buses servicing a neighborhood district or whatnot, that really is where, 37 minutes average sounds great, but if you're talking about 15 minutes at Blanchard and you're talking about 45 at Conant, that's a huge difference, right?
Absolutely, and it actually talks a little bit, the report more in detail talks about, you'll see the negative side of the metrics are kind of isolated to that Conant, McCarthytown, Merriam runs, but no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Blanchard runs much more smoothly. It's a single school with, the 8 buses, and, aside from the folks that live in North Acton that choose to attend, it's, it's pretty spot on.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Just while we're transitioning, I think we're heading into our athletics update, so Steve's coming up to the microphone. A couple thoughts. One thing we're trying to do is we entered kindergarten registration. With the changes to the buses this year, we really made a concerted effort to be very clear with our kindergarten families that when they're selecting an elementary school that they may want to have their students go to, they should also be thinking about ride times. And even though it might be common sense to a lot of people to say if I live further away from the school I'm choosing, it would take longer to get there, we wanted to also make sure that people understood this is not the same as driving your car from your house to the school. This is really, a longer bus route that's going to have to drop off many students. So we had a few slides just dedicated to that to make sure people understood the impact of, kind of the open enrollment model on ride times for buses. And then I just also, not to do that, I just want to also make sure I thank JD and Nicole for all of the work they've done. This was a monumental undertaking over the last year to get this implemented. It was a rough start to the school year. I know JD, oftentimes felt like public enemy number one throughout the change, but it really is operating efficiently, and that's really a testament to the work that both of those individuals did in getting us to this point. So kudos to both of them, even though they're not in the room to hear that.
Thank you for having me back this year. I'm excited to present my first data. We are actually, for the first time in my years here, my 6 years at the school, before as the AD, we're actually up in numbers for the first time. So we're pretty excited about that. It doesn't relate to revenue, which I'll get to in a second. But you'll see here, we were up by 27 students in the fall. So we had 588 total athletes that participated in the fall. The issue where the revenue falls in is our waivers were up, which is good because we're getting kids who aren't necessarily able to afford it that are still willing to participate and fill out the waiver forms. We've granted everyone a waiver if they requested it. Most of those kids, the new free and reduced lunch where they can actually share their information with me. I can see that information. I automatically apply the waiver if they're on free and reduced lunch, which is something we've never had the ability to do that. So it's very exciting for those students where they don't have to ask for the waiver if they're on free and reduced lunch. So I think that's a great change. So because of that, our waivers are up by 24 students. So we're up by 3. Our revenue was up $750 for the fall. Participation has been going down year to year by 5% over the last 5 years. So we're actually finally going up. Again, you'll see numbers for winter sports. We are at 413 students. We lost 2 this week on the track team. They didn't want to participate anymore. But we're up by about 11%, a little bit over 10% in athletes. Again, not reflective in the revenue, unfortunately, because there's a few reasons for that. We did not have gymnastics pay the additional $250 fee because the reason why we had them pay that in the past was because we would pay $1,000 to set up their equipment in our gym. They've asked to participate in all their meets to be at their home meet of Planet Gymnastics. We used to also pay a rental fee, but the owner of Planet Gymnastics donates his use of his gym for free. So we don't pay any extra cost to Planet Gymnastics. And we don't set up anymore. So I said if they did that, then I wouldn't charge the extra $250 fee because that was for the rental, like we pay for hockey and alpine skiing. So that went down. We had 19, but that also allowed more girls participating. So we went from 8 girls to 21 girls participating in gymnastics this year. So trackers are big numbers. They're going up by about, I think boys went up 30 participates in indoor track and girls are up by 15. So those are our big things. Another thing for revenue is the double fees, like hockey. They're down a little bit. So hockey's down a little bit. Girls and boys are both down, I think, 5 overall. And again, in the winter, waivers are up by about 10 to 12, and they're still coming in. So we still get about 50 fees to collect for the winter. But things are looking pretty much on track as they did last year. I don't think there's going to be a lot of change as far as revenue. Here you can see we were up 750. Gate fees were down, but I think gate fees will be up in the winter to offset that a little bit. Our boys basketball team's doing really well. I think they'll have a home playoff game, which brings in about $3,000. A little bit of this was the super cold Thanksgiving Day. We were down $5,000 versus 2 years ago in revenue because it was about 4 degrees on Thanksgiving Day. We did have to move one of our football games with the lighting situation. We did move to Reading, but it didn't change the number of home football games we had. It will also help us next year and not help us in 2 years. I think next year, 5 of our 7 games are at home next year. So 2 years from now, that will switch, so unless we change the schedule. So ABSAF gifts are down about $1,000, and gifts will decline. A lot of our fundraising that our booster clubs had given me was for assistant coaches, but you guys have provided us over the last 2 years with assistant coaches for 2/3 of our varsity teams, and that will be my one thing that I ask for is we had a 3-year process where we try to get an assistant coach for all of our varsity teams, and my request is going to be fulfilling the third set of that. So I'm recommending that our fee stay the same, not change. Last year, you approved our 2 of 3 step with a $29,000 increase to our coaching line. And I'm asking for the third step of that. Instead of one $100,000 hit, I asked it for over 3 years, and slowly implement assistant coaches across the board. Next year, 2 things I'd like to add to our mix. Neither am I AA sports, but I think these are 2 big groups that we don't utilize, and I think it goes with a group of students that are really looking to be part of something and haven't been able to yet. So I'm looking to start an esports program. The esports program exists in the high school under the video game club. I'm looking to bring it into the athletic department that is recognized by the National Federation of High School Associations, like cheerleading is, like speech and debate is. Esports has just been approved this year to be recognized by the National Federation, which the MIAA has also acknowledged that esports is coming through the federation. And I would like to add, most of the teams in the DCL have a fencing team. I think if we added a fencing team next year, we have enough talented fencers that we could actually go for a state championship in our first year. We have a girl on the fencing program that is nationally ranked for under 16, and there are a lot of fencers that are really talented. We don't have a team right now. I tried to start one this year. It was a lot of money to kind of get up front to start, so I'm asking for a little bit of that, and I'm willing to fund the rest of it through the same fees for both of these clubs that all the other athletes would face. So you can see these are the last 3 years. When I first took over, FY15 had a negative $67,000 deficit. I did a lot of working the budget and cutting some of the each team's cost on what they could spend to see what we could save. We got it down to negative $99,000, but a lot of the things at that point, we started to need new uniforms that hadn't been replaced in 7 years and that kind of stuff. So we raised the fee. I did not do anything with any money because I wanted to see where we'd stand that first year. We ended up with $66,000 surplus. I started to spend that money last year. We bought new uniforms for all the fall teams for the junior high, and we just did the spring teams for junior high this year. We've bought scoreboards for the softball program, put a scoreboard up out there. That's not in this fee. That's still got to come out because we haven't paid for it yet. But that would be reflected in FY18. Again, this looks like a scary number, $19,000 deficit, but I have to budget that every team will play a home game, so we have to play a refs throughout the playoffs, and we have to bus all of our kids throughout a state championship program. That will not be $19,000. I think it'll be closer to about a $5,000 positive the way things are looking right now. But this allows me to spend a lot more money on uniforms for teams. There are some teams that have been asking for the last year or two, and I'm starting to honor those requests with the surplus that I have. So it's been good. We're starting to get back up the budgets for the supplies for each team with the money that we have. So I think it's a very exciting time for the athletic department, and I think we're doing really good. Yes.
Mary.
So I asked a question of what is esports? Is it Wii bowling? And people laughed, but I still don't get what esports are.
So esports, right now there are 6 recognized games that teams can take a part of. We actually have one of our esports that participates independently on their own, in their own houses. That is number 2 in the country. They came in second in the country in a competition in the summertime competition. And it's 6 different things. There's Fortnite, there's League of Legends, there's War of Worlds, Battlefield 4, Overwatch. You'll see Fortnite's the big one on the news that you hear a lot about, but League of Legends is our really good team. That's where we're second in the country. And Overwatch is what you see on the news where that sold out the Barclays and 30 seconds when they opened up their 20,000 seat stadium for their World Finals. It was against Philadelphia and London, and they sold out the whole Barclays Center in 30 seconds.
I have to say, I still don't know what you're talking about. But, oh my gosh, people go sit and watch people play video games?
Oh, it's huge.
Wow.
It's huge.
I don't want to take away from committee time, but Steve, do you mind sharing a little bit about college scholarships that are actually available for esports and the total dollar value that's estimated to be coming up?
This year, there's going to be $10 million going out for college scholarships. You'll see there's 37 colleges that offer full boat scholarships or partial scholarships for esports teams. They're building now practice facilities at colleges that are $40,000 practice facilities. If you go online and look up, you'll see, I've reached out to Bob Kraft, owns a esports team, just like he owns the Patriots. I've reached out to his group. They also own Activision, but they own the Overwatch team. It's called the Boston Rising is the name of their team. They have a whole facility where it's all nutrition based. It's all exercises. They have chefs that cook for them when they go in. They have exercises and trainers that work with them on their stamina, and then they practice 9 hours a day of video games. So it's really interesting stuff. It's not something, I pay an hour or two with my son, and that's a long time on a weekend. These guys are doing it hours and hours at a time. There's a lot of, I have data for you that I can share with you on how it's a huge help for socialization for boys, that those kids don't often participate in social talking and getting to know people, but they have to communicate with their teammates. It's all done via headset. They're not face to face, but they're still communicating with other students their age that type of student in the past has never done.
I'm looking at the clock, so I'm going to ask you if you can hold off on your questions. I can't wrap my head around this esports thing, I have to say. I'd like to move on at this point, just to keep us on track, so we can get home.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Feel free to email me any questions you have. I'll gladly answer. Thank you, guys.
All right, so just on the same theme as Kirsten's coming up to the microphone, I just want to make sure I thank Steve, because it's been a pleasure working with him. To be able to have such a creative athletic director who really thinks much more broadly about student interests than just maybe some of the more traditional team sports that a lot of high schools have in play, it really, we just have a gem having Steve here. So Steve, thank you so much for everything you've done. Thank you for keeping kids first.
Good evening. Thank you for having me back. My name is Kristen Nelson. I'm the Food Services Director for the Acton-Boxborough Schools. I'd like to just talk about our mission is to serve high-quality food to students in a warm and welcoming environment in all of our schools. Just to give you a quick overview, the lunch program consists of 7 on-site kitchens. We serve hot lunches daily in all of our schools. All schools are now offering breakfast as of this year. We serve lunches to extended day students on Thursdays. We provide lunches for the Victor School in Acton. We have very clean kitchens. We have hardworking staff, and we consider ourselves to be the busiest restaurant in town. We're also the recipient of the Healthier U.S. School Challenge for the elementary schools. Some new initiatives. I'm pleased to say that we now have recycling in 7 out of 8 of the schools. We have Gates is the last school to come on board, and they're getting ready to join us. So I think by the fall, we'll be on board with everybody. We also started a local sustainable fish program at the high school. This is something that I started this year, which I'll show you in a slide. It's been quite exciting. We have lunch that we're offering now at the admin building once a week to the faculty, now that they've deserted us from the we're now on Twitter, so if you guys want to follow us, we're on AB Food Services 1. We have a new look to our menus in January, so if you people have students, hopefully you've seen them. And we're working on new menu items being offered. The slide shows pictures from, I had the opportunity to go into Boston and go down to the pier and see what they're doing in all the different, 2 different fish companies. So they were working on salmon over here. It's amazing. They work in refrigerated circumstances for 8 hours in a day. And just to trade jobs with them for a day, I think it would make everybody really appreciate their job. It's amazing what they do. And then the middle slide is a picture of the representative from the fish company with holding the monkfish, as well as an intern that we had who's a former grad from AB. And then Coach Hogue is in the shark costume, getting all the kids to get the lunch that day. So the first day we served 65 pounds, and then now we're up to about 95 pounds of fish that we're serving on an average day, which I did not think. I thought we could either go really bad with this or really good, so it was a really good thing. We also participate in the Mass Farm to School program, so the slides show students at Conant husking corn for lunch at Conant. We also have a cooking club that we offer. We do 2 sessions each year. Deb Rimpus, Jean Tibbetts, and myself are the advisors. And in the slide in the middle here, I don't know if you can see it well, but this bike is actually generating a blender to make the smoothie. So the kids are exercising to get their smoothies. So that was a really fun thing. We had we had an exercise program in the morning where the students came in. We fed them breakfast. The kids were on the bike. It was really awesome. It was fun. So we have our next cooking club starting tomorrow. So if anybody wants to join us, come on over. We're doing an Italian-themed dinner for this one. The other services that we provide, we have catering for quite a few school events. We have monthly specials that we do with soups, quiche, breads offered to the staff. We also have a Boar's Head deli meat that's sliced to order for staff on the go. We offer bag lunches for field trips. And we have an opening day cookout for the 7th grade students. You'll see Mr. Shen on the grill over here. We also do food tastings with the students. We're part of the mass buying group. We have about 54 school districts that we bid with so that we get good pricing. This is a picture of us conducting a taste test just before vacation. We had about 50 students show up after school, and we did a whole taste test of chicken. So we had a lot of kids. We have a website, abschools.org. We post our menus there, information pertaining to free and reduced meals, lunch prices, the information for School Cafe, which is a platform where families can pay, pictures of the lunches, and just the fun times we have with our students. Just an overview for anybody who might not know, we have a point-of-sale system, and it allows students to pay with either cash or to debit their charge account. Parents and guardians can add to the account by cash or check or through the portal. New this year, we have the ability for parents to transfer within their student's account. So if John has $100 and Joe has $50 and you want to transfer something over, you can do that yourself now. We generate weekly emails for balances below zero. We have the ability to have a la carte restrictions through School Cafe, and we also have a mobile app that we launched last year for this. We track our inventory and orders through there, and that's the point of sale. This slide shows the lunch prices that we've had over the past several years. We've been able to maintain the same price. The last time we increased was back in 2013, 2014, when we regionalized. So we've been holding at $2.75. We also have the ability that we've had tiered pricing at the high school and junior high, so we can go slightly higher than the $2.75. So for example, if someone were to get a smoothie lunch, it would be $3.25, a salad lunch is $3.50 or $3.75, Boar's Head is $3.50 to $3.75, and the fish is $4. And that gives us the ability to have what's called a paid lunch equity. They look for us to have the equivalent of what they would pay for a free student federally, so that we're not paying, that students aren't paying less, so that they're not subsidizing us anymore. So our current average is $2.89, and the rates for the 1920 paid lunch equity have not been released yet. I was asked to speak a little bit about the difference of free and reduced eligibility versus the economically disadvantaged, so I hope in the next couple of slides I can help clarify that for everybody. The food services, we accept manual applications. We also accept applications online. We run what's called a virtual gateway match once a month. The minimum requirement is 3 times a year. Kirsten in our office is doing it every month as a minimum. We manually match for siblings, so if somebody comes through as on the gateway as an exact match, we're looking for if somebody has a hyphenated name, as long as they're in the same address, we're extending the benefits onto that. So for those reasons, we're generally higher than what the state reports. This is a slide on the student eligibility. As you can see, it's growing in numbers. Back in 2013, that doesn't include Blanchard's data. So regionalization started in 14 with 7%, and now we're at 10.45%. The red is reduced, and you'll see quite a big difference in numbers in the last couple of years. The reason for that is the gateway now matches on reduced eligibility in addition to free eligibility. So we're seeing an increase in reduced numbers as well as free numbers. Just as a side note, the McCarthy Town School is now at 15% free and reduced. This is a slide that I was asked to just include. So for example, does this do the, oh no, I was trying to do a laser. Sorry, I didn't want to do that. For a family of 3, as long as they were under 27,000, they would be eligible for free lunch. If they were at under the 38,000, but over the 27,000, then they would be eligible for reduced lunch. So this is the chart that we use. It's through our point of sale system, but that's the chart that we use federally. And then the difference for the economically disadvantaged is the Department of Ed works with the Executive Office of Health and Human Services to match enrolled students against the direct certification database, but they're only matching 3 times a year. So they're doing a match, that's my next one, I think, on October 1st, March 1st, and the end of the year. And they're matching students that participate in SNAP, which is formerly food stamps, transitional assistance, foster care, or mass health. And the result would be an economically disadvantaged status. So for these reasons, the free and reduced numbers are higher than the economically disadvantaged. And then I just put a slide together of the Department of Ed's reported economically disadvantaged versus free and reduced. We don't have the 18 number yet from the Department of Ed, but as you can see, our numbers are off slightly, and that's why. Our breakfast counts have been rising. We currently, this year, have all schools on board, but as of this slide, we had Conant, Gates, McCarthy Town, Merriam, junior high, and the high school. So next year, you'll see everybody. These are our reimbursable lunch counts. Again, you'll see the increase in the reduced with the red. We went from 3,800 lunches last year for reduced to 11,000, close to 12,000 this year, last year, sorry. 16, 17, 17, 18. I like to do a slide on equipment just so you get to see, generally speaking, we have quite a bit in equipment repairs. We have older kitchens. We've had to do some replacement of some things, but for the most part, this just gives you an overall view of what we've done in the last few years. And then our receipts and expenses. So our fund balance as of June 30th, 2017 was $696,000. Our fund balance on June 30th, 2018 was $680,000. So we had a $16,000 loss. The current debt for lunch accounts, so people that still owe money, as of today is $2,600. You hear of some school districts are like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So a comparison for us, as I just noted, we did lose money this last year, which was the first time in forever that I've been here. So it shows the starting fund balance in 16, 17, and 18, and then the ending fund balance. So our current fund balance as of November 30th is $664,000. We have $75,000 to $100,000 earmarked for the project that was done at the high school for the CAF renovation. And the Department of Ed recommends that we have a total of 3 months operating expenses for our fund balance, which we do have. So a recommendation at this time is that we would not increase lunch prices. We're going to wait and see what the paid lunch equity rate will be once it comes out. This is a picture of the new CAF with the renovation. The kids are loving it. Looks great. It's beautiful. And then as far as looking ahead, we just wanted to possibly start conversations about feeding the students on half days for elementary early release. because kids are getting home later and we're hearing that kids are hungry. We're looking at working with some interactive menus, working on new menu items, and then also looking at, with our point of sale system, to have a grab and go order in advance for the high school students, but that's not yet launched, but that's what we're working on. I also just want to say all of our staff are awesome, and this particular manager is Jean Tibbetts from the junior high. I nominated her for the School Lunch Superhero Award for all of Massachusetts, and she won the award. So we surprised her and had somebody from the School Nutrition Association come out, and her family was there, and all the kids were there in the CAF, and it was just awesome. So that was a really special day for her. And we just believe it takes a partnership with the parents and the guardians, the faculty and the staff. Our motto is, a well-fed child is ready to learn. So thank you for letting us serve you every day. Yes.
Michael?
I would say this is good. What I heard, this is pretty good, impressive. And I do have a question. So do we have nutrition specialist?
A nutrition specialist. What we do is we...
Because I know that, there's a nutrition certificate, so people can get that certificate and become the, to get a job on this area. So I just wonder if we have, nutrition specialist.
So what we do is so in our office, we work and we take all of the ingredients and we enter them in our point of sale system, which does a nutrient analysis for us. So it makes us so that we know that we're within the guidelines of what we're supposed to be offering. We also take on interns from Framingham State. This year I had somebody from Iowa State who has come to work with us or on dietetic internships. So we train them and they work with us. And then in turn we get work with them being here for their internship as well.
I see. Thank you.
Mary?
So first I want to say my daughter's a vegetarian, and I really appreciate all the vegetarian options. As you look at new menu items, it's great when it's an item that can be flexible, whether it's vegetarian or not. That's awesome. One thing to point out, if I go and look at the menu on the phone, sometimes you do 2 months, you can't get to that
I've had
month
that
on the
happen to me
right.
too, I know. You have to turn it sideways to make it work.
Oh, I didn't
That's
even think of that.
That's the only way I can get it.
I didn't even think of that. I just went on my computer, so.
Yes, I know. I'll have to talk to Amy about that, because I have had that happen to me as well. But if you turn it sideways, it will work.
Maya?
Thank you for a great presentation. I wonder if you've had any innovation or added benefits to kids with severe allergies. My kid, for instance, has celiac disease and a 504 plan, and it's hard for her to eat in social settings. And I wonder what the district is doing to meet the needs of kids who have serious allergies.
So we meet, anybody that has allergies, we encourage them to come in and meet with us, and we have a book with all of our ingredients, nutritionals, everything. So we sit down usually with the parents and ask them to come in ahead of time so that we can go through that book and look through it and make sure it's something that your child can have. We do have gluten-free options available daily, but it's limited. So, we'd like to work on getting some more, but we haven't had more. We offer a gluten-free turkey wrap on a brown rice wrap, and we also offer pizza on Fridays, so that's usually a hit.
I think fish sounds wonderful as a gluten-free option.
I don't know if the elementary kids would do it. I'm seriously so surprised that we had so many kids. We sold out the first day at the high school. Yeah, we really did. It was great.
Tessa?
Thank you. That was really a great presentation. I noticed on the elementary menu this month at Blanchard, because that's where my kids go, that there were some new menu items. One of the things I've heard at the community coffees, at least at Blanchard, is that our food options don't necessarily reflect the cultures of an increasing number of our students, and I wonder where we are in that, like getting away from, I noticed more this month, so it's not completely like I don't notice anything, but just wondering.
We're definitely working on that. I actually invited a neighbor of mine to come, and she worked with us at the high school, and we worked on a chicken curry dish. So we're working on some new items that meet that as well. We also have a new manager at our high school. We transitioned a new manager at McCarthy Town and Merriam. So I'm careful in adding too many things that they can't handle with transition, but we've certainly added quite a few new new items this year, which I'm very proud to say.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay, last question, Angie?
Along with the allergy, so the menu, does all the ingredients listed so the kids know, they have certain allergy, so they can look at it and so what to eat, what not to take? Is all the ingredients listed?
It's not listed in the cafeteria, but we have a book that's in our office that we send out to all the schools. So we make appointments for parents to come in and take a look at it. At the high school level, sometimes we'll have students that'll look at it, but generally speaking, we see it more at the elementary level. But it
Okay.
is available.
Okay.
We're looking at, we're not quite sure how we're going to do it yet, but we're looking at possibly linking the nutritionals with the menu item. Part of the interactive menus that we're working on would be to link the nutritionals and the ingredients to the menu item. So we're not quite sure how we're going to handle that yet. We're working on that right now, actually, so.
I'm also interested to get more insight on the recycling. So can you kind of elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, the only school that we are serving styrofoam trays at right now is at the Gates Elementary School. All the other schools have all turned over to compostable trays. So we are doing either a recyclable boat, which is, kind of I guess, I should have brought them, that students can get their lunches on, or if it's a little bit more of a messy lunch with like a marinara sauce or whatever, we're doing a compostable tray that is a round tray with several sections in it. So we have two different trays that we're using depending on what the menu item is.
There is some school that, some kids, they don't eat certain food and it's brand new and they collect that and to recycle to some other services. I don't know whether we are looking into something like that.
Are you talking about a share table?
Yeah.
Yes. That's something that we've looked at. I'm a little bit hesitant because of people with allergies and things like that to put things out on a table globally. We did do a little bit with Gates. We were bringing like the bagged carrots and things that could be reused. So we did that a little bit over there. So we're kind of testing the waters a little.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Kristen, thank you so much for everything you do. It's awesome to have such a forward-thinking food services department. And if for some reason you ever decide to not do this, we know you have a future in tech support.
Mary, as I was walking up here, the book Girl Code is here. You might want to take a look. Gaming, going viral, and getting it done. Okay, I'm going to do a quick overview of All-Day K and the budgetary implications. The numbers are almost exactly the same as a year ago, so not too much here. But here we have the sections by school this year that we have. You might remember that we put 4 kindergartens at Blanchard this year, 3 of which are All-Day K. And then we have 3 at Conant, 2 at Douglas and Gates, and 3 at McCarthytown and Merriam. Those are our total kindergartens, and then every school has 1 half-day, and the rest are all-day. So we have 11 all-days, and we have 6 half-days. That's with 330 students. We have 219 students in all-day kindergarten this year, or 66.3%. Next year, we're looking at almost exactly the same thing. The only difference is we moved 1 kindergarten from Blanchard to Douglas for next year, so every school will have 3 Ks, 2 of which are all-day, except for Gates, which will have 2 Ks, 1 all-day, 1 half-day. Again, almost 2/3 of our kids will be in all-day. We're projecting 220 in all-day. That'll be 4 years in a row, about the same number. Right now, we're projecting about 340 kindergartners, give or take 10. Here's the history. You can see when we got to 11 all-day kindergartens, that has been consistent in terms of being able to meet the requests that we get. We get about 70% of our families ask for all day, and we can accommodate 66% of them. And then budgetarily, it's the revenues, expenses, and profit are listed here. FY18, we have a slight decrease or loss, if you will, but it was fairly intentional. The fee has been $4,500 for several years now, and the fund balance is right around $350. So we're intentionally budgeting close to losing some money so that we can eat a bit of that fund balance. So we're recommending that we keep the $4,500 fee, and we expect to have about the same number of kids in all day in the same number of sections. The committee received an email about considering going to universal all-day K. So we talked about it a little bit as a leadership team, and there's a little bit of information here. We're willing to gather some information over the next 6 months or so to think about whether or not we want to make a goal of looking at it next year. We would study it for a year before we would make a recommendation. Here we have sort of the issues we would be looking at around equity, and parent preference. Why are families selecting all day and half day? Are there any performance implications? And so on. But the bad news is it would be an expensive undertaking. So roughly $1.2 million to go to full universal no fee all day kindergarten. So we'd have to think about it. We would probably implement it over a number of years if we were to do it. And I think the way that we could do it is to gradually reduce the fee and gradually put money in the budget, but it's $1.2 million. So we have not done a full study of it. In the past, we haven't really had the space for that. We're getting to the point where we could accommodate it space-wise. So we'll think about whether the committee wants us to consider the implications over time. It is not a goal in this year's plan. Any questions? Thank you.
Those kids, if we had universal all-day K, the reimbursement is like $30 a person or something?
Yeah.
Per student from the state, so that's it. That's what we would get in additional aid.
Yeah. So it isn't that, yeah. So Chapter 78, there's a lot to it, but all we get, relatively speaking, for more kids is $30 per student. So going from year to year, $30 per student. So we're in the minimum aid position. So we would not get hardly any money. We estimated, we actually, a couple of years ago, asked the Department of Ed to look at that for us. And it's, depending how everything works out, it's between $0 and $5,000. It would not be a lot.
Go ahead.
So I'm glad you're going to study this. If you go back a slide or two, I think on your bullet item was to find out why parents are picking a half-day versus all-day, and because I'm interested to see that, because I would hesitate. I mean, I'm okay with all-day kindergarten, but I don't want to lose the option for a family to choose only half-day if that's the right thing for their child. So I'm interested to see how this flushes out.
Okay? Thank you.
So at this point, we just want feedback from people overall on the budget to prepare.
Okay. Are we skipping 7.4 then?
What's that?
7.4.
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
Yeah, okay, that's okay. So at this point, we are on 7.4, so I'm going to turn to Paul for an update on the Acton Leadership Group. This will be followed by an update from the Boxborough Leadership Forum meeting by Tessa.
So we met just after, I guess, Budget Subcommittee met, and we've been following a budget deficit to try to close the gap of 750,000 plus or minus on the Acton side, and after Budget Committee did their work to come up with what we saw earlier, about $250,000 in savings from the previous budget estimate. That kind of helped close that gap. It's now Board of Selectmen are looking into seeing what they can do on their side. If they need to do anything, Finance Committee is kind of looking at how to close that gap, whether through reserves or whatever. But I think kudos to the Budget Subcommittee for doing the work that they did, because that kind of set us in a good position for all that kind of discussion. No one's looking at the schools for reducing that gap. So thank you for the work that the Budget Subcommittee's done.
So Boxborough had their budget on Saturday, and Peter came and presented, and Dave and Marie were there, and everyone was very excited about the budget. We had a BLF meeting on Tuesday. The biggest thing that affects any of us, I guess, is that we have two very big zoning questions for town meeting coming up, and there was a lot of discussion about how town meeting, we've gotten used to it being only 2 nights, but this year it could really be 3 nights or more nights, because we have the marijuana question as far as zoning goes, and then we also have some business zoning that will likely generate a lot of discussion. So they just wanted the school district to be aware of the potential nights that town meeting could occur, so that big things aren't scheduled, like concerts and whatnot. So if we can just take a look at I know we probably have the first 3 nights on there, but there was some concern because and we may set it up differently as a special town meeting, et cetera. So stay tuned. But that was the biggest thing that came out of the meeting.
Can I just add, and for room setup, so the gym, and we think one of those nights, we had talked in the past, we might need the cafeteria space, although we're contemplating going to the Regency for one of the nights. It's so hard with 2 new town managers. I'm like, which one's which? Ryan will be in touch with you about our needs, so.
Paul?
Should we have school committee members attending, or is it the Boxbow folks? Is that all we need?
For the budget part, you should be there. Yeah, so we'll let you know when that'll be.
Okay. No further questions. We'll move on to 7.6. You'll find in your packet a meeting agenda for Budget Saturday. And it's a little bit different every time. And this year, I really, I do like the way that it's set up. The panels are arranged by the driving idea behind the panels are goals. So social emotional panel, a panel on equity, and then access to safe and effective learning environments. Is there anything you wanted to say about that?
So, thank you. So I think one of the things that we were hoping to do, or are hoping to do on Budget Saturday, is not just present a budget, but tell you a little bit of a story about why these are such important budget priorities. So what we wanted to do on each of the panels is delve into the area a little bit and give you some of the data around why we're making the decisions we're making, so that when you see a budget request come later and you have a frame of reference for why that's such an important district initiative. So that's really the only reason that we wanted to shift the strategy of how we presented the budget coming up, and we're excited to do that. We had our panels working together to develop their presentations yesterday, and we're going to be continuing to do that over the next week and a half or so.
Yes, Amy, we're going to move right into questions, so I'll just go ahead and call on you first.
I wanted to say something about Budget Saturday. One thing that happened last year was that as each panel presented, there was a lot of discussion right after the panel, and then when we came to the actual vote, a lot of the questions had all been discussed. So we found that allowing more time for questions after each panel and not needing so much time at the end of the day we thought would work better. So I just was going to throw that out there in terms of just the way things worked last year. It seems like the rich discussions happen right after you hear the information. And you want to make sure you have enough time to really allow for those kinds of questions and discussions.
Thank you for the comment, Amy. The times that are here right now have already been revised and with exactly what you're saying in mind, and to make sure that there's time for the presentations and we don't go over. So as we're honing the presentations, we realized we needed more time in the morning. So the panel on equitable opportunities to learn has actually been moved to after lunch. So the two morning panels are stretched a little with more time for questions. But exactly what you said, and we remembered the same thing, so there are 20 to 30 minutes after every panel for questions, and then the end of the day seemed to not necessarily need as much. So thank you. But just take the times for, they're modifying, but we will start 8:15 and end at 3.
Okay, feedback?
The other thing is just a reminder that the language in the regional agreement states that you really need to take a budget vote twice. There's language around a preliminary budget vote and a final budget vote. The final budget vote has to be 45 days before the first town meeting, which is roughly mid-February. The preliminary vote has to be 25 days before that, 25 days before that deadline, to be accurate. So that's why we ask for a preliminary budget vote on Budget Saturday, is to meet that requirement of the regional agreement. And then your final budget vote will be in February. And we've laid it out, so depending where you are, you can either do it on the 7th or the 13th, depending on whether you want that extra week or not. The 7th is the budget hearing, and there is a meeting scheduled for the 13th, if you want to wait and take the vote that night. Thank you.
Okay, so we're squarely on 7.7, school committee budget feedback and questions. So here's this is your opportunity to give your impressions and any questions and concerns you might have on the budget. Michael.
Because JD Head is not here, I just have a question for Peter. So I assume that I just want to go back to that school buses, because that's big topic. That has been the big topic, during the last winter and this winter. And the parents, students, they were, they showed some happiness. With that preliminary budget, right? So assume that we plan to add 3 additional school buses, right? And then with the recommended, and we drop 1, and then we recommend 2, right? Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to back to what Mary said earlier. So I think, it's not about 2 or 3. It's about, what target do we want to achieve, and how do we want to, improve the situation, right? So if it's just, we think, just adding 2 just to help a little bit, this is probably not, efficient. That's from my understanding. So even adding 7, say, just to help the situation, probably is not efficient as well. So we have to figure out, what we want to achieve, and, how to meet because, the parents, students, families, they already made a lot of complaints and other things, they want to achieve. So I think we should review them and then to say, what could be the, plan to meet those, the families' needs. So not necessarily to be this year, the FY20, but we should, have some like 3-year plan, 5-year plan, to, completely improve this.
I just want to make sure I want to make sure I'm understanding. Are you suggesting that we continue to increase the number of buses each year?
Well, I would say that based on, how do we want to improve the situation? Because, if this is just continue year after year, so last year we heard a lot of complaints, and this year continue, and the next year continue, it doesn't sound right to me. This is just, this situation has to be stopped.
Okay. What I would suggest, I would probably defer that to the will of the committee, because I think our goal as a district was to implement the committee's guidelines that they had put forward, which was to produce a 45-minute ride time and efficient buses. And I think we are making our recommendations based on the GPI analysis that we're running an efficient system. But I'm very, very open. If the committee wants to change those guidelines, then I think I can work with that. But I think that would be my goal, is to get the will of the committee on that as well.
But without a plan, it's just throwing the money and then to say, hey, add 2 additional buses and just, try to help a little bit. I cannot support this. Sorry.
Mary.
I think that it is a discussion among the school committee, and it's not just, it's a discussion, is 45 minutes the goal, and then what's the error we're willing to have around that? I personally think 94% within that is pretty good, and I think 2 buses is going to make that even better, the addition of 2 buses. But, so I think there needs to be a conversation, because you can't make a plan until you know what the goal is. And so I think that would need to be, I personally do support the 2 buses in the 20 budget. And then it's a longer-term discussion about what is it the committee wants to charge the administration with, and then they can come up with the plan how to reach that. But I do think we have a huge transportation system, and I don't see adding a lot more buses. I think it ends up being inefficient. I think we're running a pretty efficient system.
Just to clarify too, our goal with adding 2 buses, we do have a performance target, which is have our students arrive at Conant and McCarthy Town prior to the start of school. So, because right now we're not doing that consistently with every bus. That's the problem we're having, is kids are coming late to school because the buses can't make that trip. What we're hoping to do is, by adding 2 buses, and we probably need to look at an adjustment in the start times of 1 or more of those schools. As she noted in the report, really looking at a 10-minute shift is probably, both strategies are needed to get there.
Okay, Tessa?
My understanding from that very thorough presentation by GPI was really that we have to balance, goals of whatever it is, 45 minutes, 35 minutes, with the efficiency of our buses, because our transportation system is so huge. And at least my understanding from looking at what we had in a 3-tier system was that we had a lot of inefficiency and overcrowding and things like that. So by adding the 2 buses, it seems like that will make things a lot better. What I thought was really most interesting is when she presented what we would need to totally separate those 3 schools, but those 2 location sites, whatever, so that Conant would have their own buses, much like Blanchard has their own buses, leads to so many buses running around, until we make a decision whether or not we're going to, have a modified choice system where people are going certain places, I don't even know, or getting rid of choice or whatever. It doesn't seem like it makes sense to add that number of buses, because then you've got everybody, like so many buses going through neighborhoods. I mean, we live on a tiny street in Boxborough. We already have 2 buses go down our street. Sometimes, I don't know, sometimes there's this random third bus that goes by. I don't know where that's coming from. But to me, listening to her report, it's not that 2 was some willy-nilly number that they just picked out of the air. It really was targeting certain neighborhoods where there could be better efficiency of getting kids to and from school by separating just a few of those routes, like JD said, a bit of a hybrid method.
Amy?
Just going to piggyback on what Tessa just said. One of the things she did show us was that in order to get to a 35-minute run, we would have to add the 7 buses. And just the logistics of, that just sounds outrageous to me because I can't imagine that many more buses on the road. And even then, the congestion created by adding that number of buses might not even get us to that place anyway. So I would say I'm comfortable with the 45 minutes, and I think, I completely support adding the 2 buses based on what I saw today.
Anyone else want to weigh in if we should be prioritizing a shorter bus ride at the expense of having less full buses, which is what we were doing before? Or are we okay with our current policy of 45 minutes?
I'm okay with the 45 minutes. I think that I personally would hate to lose the open enrollment because I think that's something that is an equity in and of itself, so that it doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in, you can choose whatever school you go to. So, and I think that is the foundation of that concept. But I do like the idea of adding two buses. When I look at the economics of 7 buses, that's $1 million. Plus, I'm not sure we can get enough drivers for those buses. I'm concerned about getting enough drivers for the 2 additional. But I think that proposal for 2, or recommendation for 2 additional buses is kind of hitting the sweet spot of what we need to just get, palliate some of the issues that we have. So I'm supporting 2 buses.
Okay, Jenny?
I wanted to say that when tonight was the first time, and I must have missed it earlier, that I understood that it was getting on the bus to Bell and, Bell to getting off the bus, because I lived a mile away from school and my kids were on the bus for 45 minutes. So it's still a long time, and for the younger kids who are in second wave, it seems like a long time, but it seems from my experience alone, it's an improvement, although from what you hear from people in the community, it's surprising. But, if that's the data, that's the data. But anyway, I support the 2 buses as well, and I think that getting the buses to school before the school day starts is a very worthy goal. So we should do that.
Tessa?
Just to piggyback on what Jenny said, and actually, Peter, you mentioned it earlier, that you said at the kindergarten orientation that this is something that people should take into consideration. I think the idea of school choice, you can go to any school, I think that people forget, especially if they haven't had the experience of their children riding buses, that, 45 minutes might be really long for a 5-year-old, and that it should be part of the decision-making. It's an important thing if that matters to you, and it doesn't matter to some families, but as we've learned, it matters a lot to some families. And if you can't mitigate that by driving your kids or, having some other kind of experience, then it could turn into something that it doesn't have to be if you chose a school that was closer to your home.
Maya?
And I just want to highlight that I thought the district had great goals as it pertains to these buses, and I thought that the study was excellent and was a wonderful response to major changes that we undertook this year. And while 45 minutes isn't ideal, it's not for a tremendous amount of kids, and it's rolling out pretty smoothly, actually, and that I was really pleased with the follow-through I felt like we got a really good understanding, not too late in the year, of how things are going and really taking a temperature. So I think we're doing pretty well considering the goals we did set out around transportation as it pertains to student wellness, as it pertains to schedules, and kudos to the district.
Okay. And Michael and then Angie.
Yeah, I guess that, I think that, do we know, I have a question, do we know what are the most area or things that the families complain during the last winter and this winter? So do we know that? Adding two school buses, do we think that, we are addressing those complaints? That's, those are the questions that I want to know the answers.
So I guess that, again, I would come back to that, I probably would need the guidance from the committee on that. I think, we've heard, I think that, I'll be honest, I hear an intermittent bus issue that comes up, but I have not been receiving systemic complaints about the bus system since probably October. Once the patterns settled down, and we, ended up being able to fill the bus driver shortage that we had, that's caught up to itself. So I think, now that doesn't mean that people still aren't concerned, but it's certainly not percolating to where I'm receiving the emails that I was receiving at the beginning of the year. I think the only overarching concern that I heard was kind of that ride time, the crowding and ride time. Those were the two big things. I certainly understand and appreciate people's perceptions around that and how students feel and how families feel about it. I also see the data from GPI, and so I think what I would take away from that is we're operating right at the efficiency we designed the system at. And, I think from a decision-making standpoint, this is probably an area where I would defer to the committee, that if the committee feels like the ride time is too long, we can certainly design a system and budget for a system that shortens the ride time. Or if we feel like there's too many students on a bus, we can reduce the target ridership by adding buses to that way and budget for however many additional buses we set as a target. But what I don't want to do as an administrator, I'm uncomfortable as a superintendent we have a 40 bus transportation system, which is one of the largest transportation systems in the state. And it's driven by some of the unique elements that we have as a district. However, I think there's a tipping point between the dollars that we allocate to teaching and learning versus the dollars we allocate to how we get students to school. And while I would love to be able to have just a transportation system that can truly make everyone happy, what I also want to make sure we do is preserve the dollars that we're allocating to teaching and learning to the best we can while providing a reasonable transportation system that we can get kids to school with.
I'm going to change the subject. So I think we're going to talk about the bus in the meeting. So my question relates to the budget, which number one is would like to know more on Budget Saturday for the technology upgrade, especially for the high school, because my understanding right now, high school is kind of behind junior high and elementary school. So I would like to get more details when we talk about that. The second one is along with the security, because last time when I talked to Larry on the open one during the open house, right now if there's an intruder comes in, then we rely on the intercom to communicate, and it seems that's the only devices that we can rely on. So I'm curious about what security system that we have, and for the next year budget, and we can reduce and help the situation if there is a shooter or this intruder comes in. And the last item that I'm curious about, which is the water, because water is part of the wellness. The clean water is very important for the student, also the recycling. So want to find out if we have any consideration of providing clean, well, I know what I heard is there's some part of the school water tastes different from the others. I don't know whether it's different from school to school, so that's another area that I'm interested. Thank you.
Go ahead and ask whatever question.
No, it's more of a response. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. In answer to Michael's question, what are we doing for the families who are, exceeding the 45? I think my answer is that we're adding 2 buses. And that's not something that's going to help anything today.
That's not my concern. My concern is that do we know,
So I'm just going to ask members to raise their hand and be recognized before speaking. So I appreciate that use of that protocol.
Yeah, so I think what we need to do as a committee is look at the data and make decisions on the data. And we are, looking at budget. And if there's an issue that we need to resolve, this is how we're using the budget to resolve the issue, so.
I agree. I think the 2 buses make sense. I think transportation generally is an iterative process, as many processes are. So we will do this. I think it makes sense from a fiscal perspective, and we will reevaluate it and make some adjustments if needed. Anyone else? I see John waiting in the wings, so. Did you have a follow-up? Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I said, what I said is that, it's not about the waiting time. It's not about, transportation time, 45 minutes. It's just, in general, do we know what are the major complaints from the families? So if we know that, then we will, we can start addressing those issues, right? So that's what I target. So not just the 45 minutes. So I think I do understand adding 2 additional school buses will help, the loading time, the overall transportation time, but is that, the major complaints from the families? That's what I want to know. If that's the major complaints from the family during the last 2 winters, I'm fine with this adding 2, but if not, then we have to adjust that. We have to address the issue.
So I'm just going to react to what you said. I'm not sure I fully understood it. I think just the acoustics in here would make it really hard for me to really hear people clearly. So our purview as a school committee is to set priorities, and what I think I heard in the discussion is that we are the 45-minute target is going to stay in place. There's no consensus to change that right now, and ridership happens. That's just, the GPI study addressed the balance between ridership and times. So any kind of concerns, questions that happen at home in terms of getting to and from school are addressed via the parent communication map. And I know that both the Transportation Department and the Superintendent's Office is open to always to receiving questions and concerns, and is very proactive and responsive to addressing the concerns of the families in our district.
So I think Michael's referring to parents who complained in past winters because where their kids have to stand, they feel is not safe when there's snow on the roads. Is that what you're talking about? I mean,
Not just doing that, but, I just could.
which Peter may not even know about, because.
I try to, say, what are the major
the major
Right,
complaints.
so it's because I don't know, because
Right.
who knows? Right.
And you have to be careful because we put in a new system. So the complaints that happen right at the beginning, you kind of have to let those be addressed and then see are there still concerns. And then there's always issues at the beginning of the year because I think ridership is up right at the beginning and then kids start going to clubs and driving in and this and that. And so I think you need a reflection of what are the complaints after the first month of the school year.
Do you mind if I?
Not at all.
Actually, that's a good point. There really were three major complaints in concerns at the beginning of the year. One was the duration of bus rides. The second was the number of students on buses. And the third was actually location of bus stops, particularly families who felt during winter months the bus stop location wasn't safe. That third one is not necessarily a budgetary issue. What we've done is we've put in a winter bus stop program where initially what we rolled out was during the winter months, if there was adverse weather that might make a bus stop unsafe, the driver would work with the families to relocate the bus stop to a safe location within the neighborhood. However, we did receive additional feedback from families that could become challenging because they wouldn't know which days to move the location. So we ended up actually just working with those families and those specific bus routes to move the bus stop permanently for the winter. And then come springtime, that will change back to the normal location. But what we didn't want to put in, because every bus stop we add increases time to the overall student ride. So what we didn't want to do is put a solution that is 100% solution to a problem that arises 40% of the time. We wanted to solve a problem 40% of the time for the time that it's a problem. So we felt like that was responsive to families' needs, and we continue to work with families if they contact us. JD has been great about just working with a family, moving the bus stop. So now we're really into the types of solutions that require dollars and cents, and that's, I think, where our discussion was more based out of.
It's
Just one-
about
one more.
transportation?
Yeah, just one more.
Okay, so yeah, this will be the last, if you
Okay.
don't mind, the last.
Yeah, that's more clear because, I would say that you should have told us before this, so, it's much clearer. Yeah.
Anyone else? Doesn't have to be on transportation. Mary?
I'll just say, I think this is a great budget. I think I said this last time, too. You're achieving a lot, and the increase is less than 2.5%. And I know within Boxborough, it was very well-received. I've heard it's been well-received in Acton. And so I think it's really responsible. At the same time, it's not static. We're making improvements and moving forward, and I appreciate that.
Okay. John? Thank you for waiting.
John, Peter, is this on? I can
Tap it to see. Yeah.
Okay. John Peterson, Jackson Drive. So I'm going to make comments about transportation, but I hope people will hear them in a larger context than transportation. I thought that what Peter said with respect to, finding the balancing point in our investments to make sure that we have struck a good balance between the cost and the benefit is very important. And the bus case is an interesting one because normally for a lot of things, like if you said, well, what would it cost to move 10 students in 8th grade from needs improvement in math on a standardized test to proficient in a standardized test? You can't get that number. There's no way to know. But in the case of buses, you can make some pretty good estimates that says if we wanted to save, for some fraction of our 3,700 students who are going to take 180 bus trips, 5 minutes, you can figure out about what that fraction is where we're trying to save 5 minutes. You can figure out about what it's going to cost, and then there's a price per minute, and you can either pay that or not. So I would encourage people in this case where you can get to hard numbers to do busso economics and see what they look like, because I think that's compelling not only for the committee but for the public at large, is to say it's not worth $10 a minute to do this, or maybe it's 3 cents a minute and it is worth it. So I would encourage people to try and drive things to that kind of analysis. And then the general comment that I would make is, it's always easy to say yes. And having worked in R&D for many years, people are loath to kill projects, right? It's always fun to say, oh, this is a good idea, and this is a good idea, and this is a good idea. And of course, that's the path to an undisciplined budget and ultimately ineffective spending. So I would encourage people to ask those hard questions as you go through this budget about, is this really the right value? And again, in a pharmaceutical context where lives are on the line, and I think in the school context you can also argue that lives are on the line, lives don't have an infinite value. Not mine, not anybody else's. There's some amount of money that it's just not worth it. And so you do, in the context of the budget, need to say, are we getting a good benefit for this money that we're spending? Thank you.
Seeing no other hands up, we will move on to item 8.
Thanks. So Beth is here too, and we're going to tag team this for a very, very brief presentation of a service called ClearGov. You got a memo from me that describes what it is. Here it is. So this is the district's website, and you can see over on the left under News, ClearGov data benchmarking comparisons. And if you click on that, the site will appear. And what ClearGov does is it allows it facilitates an analysis of a lot of data, financial data and others, and we'll quickly go through it. I gave a brief overview to the budget subcommittee. It was supposed to be about 15 minutes or so. I think it went about 30 plus, because it was, they liked it. The feedback was really good. And so the number one takeaway for this tonight at this hour is going to be, go on the website, go down the left-hand side, click on it yourself, and you can't mess it up, Mary. And just look and see what you find in there. So here's the overview. It's got some very just basic information, and it's primarily DESE source data that districts, including AB, submit to them. If you go to, let's go to, hold on a second. Once you go to expenditures, if you could, Beth, right there, yes. So as you scroll down, we'll just keep scrolling down until I tell you to stop, and right there. So instructional services, if you click on view analysis, I just want to show you one thing here. So the analyses that you'll see, if you go down, there are two different peer groups. One is a collaborative, the dual county league, which wasn't as familiar to me as this one, and this is the group that was identified by the Comparable Communities Committee that the district had. And so these are those communities that were considered peers. So this is instructional expenses. You see from Weston on down, the peers that are listed in the bar graph that shows the total number of dollars on a per student basis. Then you get down and you get to the state average, and then you go below a couple more, and we're in the bottom third of the total constituents of the peer group for what that's worth. This is one category of total school expenditures. It's instructional services, and we're somewhere between $8,000 and $9,000 a student. The state average is about $10,000 a student. Informative information. What do we do with it? Perhaps it at some point will shape policy. We're at the very initial stages of using it. If you try hitting the back arrow, Beth, for one thing. I want to do one more, and now go down, and this is a caveat. So go down until we get to plant operations and maintenance, right there. So view analysis. Oh, before, sorry. Problem with live presentations. Keep going down. So, one other thing just to note. Our plant operation and maintenance went up in 2015. This goes back into the pre-full regionalization era, so always keep that in mind, and I'm going to leave you with one example of that. So if you click on View Analysis again, some things can be misleading, and so you go down and you see that there's the same faces at the top of the per student that is spent on operations and maintenance. The state average is a little higher in the group, and whereas Acton Boxborough, it's down a lot closer to the bottom. But something you may not, so you say, wait a second, so we're spending less than $1,000 a student on operation and maintenance. The state average is about almost $1,300. Some of our peers are way over that. We're underspending on facilities. Well, there's one thing that you may not know unless you have a full handle on what's in the cost buckets. This particular category includes utilities. So if JD's department does a great job of keeping utility costs down, that's going to drive this number down. So that's one of the things just to keep in mind, that the data themselves may not tell the full story. You may need some interpretation on top of that. That's about all I have, just to give you this much of an appetite to dig into it, and we'll hopefully begin to use this and maybe make some report presentations that are based on this. It's more for analyzing the district in comparison to this group. For one, we can make our own peer groups. I'm interested in having a peer group made that focuses on regionals of a similar characteristic to AB, because sometimes you don't get a lot of comparability when you compare a municipal district and regions. So if no questions, I encourage everybody, go to the web, can't be easier, go to the website, it's right there, not front and center, left and center on the website, and just see what you find.
So I did do that when you gave us the link, and I'm okay with the transparency, but I worry that people are going to misuse this data, and so that's a comment, and there's not much we can do about that. But I do have a question about the peer groups. What I heard you say is that this is our comparable communities group.
This group here, I believe, was derived from the Comparable Communities Committee, and Marie's shaking her head no. And
No, it isn't. It was a list, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. The Comparable Communities list was developed by Peter Ashton, and the Comparative Communities list, well,
We voted this a number of years ago, and we talked about who was in it, and I don't know when. I mean, we've been doing it for so many years. Peter's done it, but I think the school committee decided who they wanted in on that list.
and we based that decision on a presentation by the Ashtons.
is the issue that the title is wrong here, and it's the school committee's comparable communities and not the committee, that other committees?
No.
So,
The Comparable Communities Committee, which I sat on very soon after I came onto school committee, used the Ashton list.
Yep.
We did add, I think, one district.
So the school committee asked Peter Ashton to go out and determine a comparable list of communities. He had done it before for the town of Acton a few times, and basically he based it on 5 or 6 criteria that includes wealth, affordability, EQV, income, performance, location, I'm missing one or two.
Size.
Size of the school district. And there was a specific request to include some comparable regional districts, so there are fewer of those in there. Anyway, and then he came and presented to the school committee, and the school committee voted it. It's probably 4 or 5 years old now, I'd guess about 4 years. But that's the list that the comparable community subcommittee used, and that's the list that we put into ClearGov.
So I apologize for the confusion
That's okay.
of the nomenclature.
No, my question is, given all that, and my understanding that there had been, the Ashtons had done that work years before that, and came up, the list changes. As the districts change, the list change. So my question is this list decided by us, and we tell the site which communities? Okay.
Absolutely.
So 3 years from now, or tomorrow, when we decide that we need to generate a different list, we can tell the site that this list needs to change.
We change it.
We change it. Good. Okay, thank you.
Michael?
I share the same concern with Paul, people could misuse this data, right? Because as what you said, JD had, did some good job on the utility savings, so this is not reflect here, right? So with the customization, are we going to be able to, to do something to present, better things to
That's the
explain
plan,
that
is
as well?
to utilize this and make reports that you find noteworthy from an interest standpoint, but something which could potentially drive policy or changes to be able to say, this is how our selected peer groups or a particular peer group addresses this problem. We didn't get into, by the way, the performance metrics, which are very interesting and probably have more relevance to you folks than looking at some static financial data that's always in the rearview mirror. But my job will be to look at it, and if I'm going to come to you with a presentation, I don't plan to make it to show off how cool a site this is, but to drive an initiative that leadership is planning, that this might help with.
Mary?
I just want everyone to understand, these data are already out there. You can go on to ClearGov and get this for any community. We joined a membership so that we could tailor it to some of our particular needs and get information that can really help us with our programming and our policy. So those data are already out there. They're DESI data. We report them. DESI has them. People can go get them here. They could last year or the year before. So there's no change there.
Paul?
I view this kind of in a similar way as MCAS data informs us as to performance of the students. We use that MCAS data to make decisions on where we allocate resources. What concerns me a little is when parents use that data for qualitative judgments on the schools, and to me that's misuse of the data. And again, this is wonderful. I like having the data at the fingertips, but I want to make sure, as Mary was saying, we use it to inform ourselves to make decisions, not to make judgments on other communities or our schools or whatever.
This is a great tool, I have to tell you. It is so amazing that I can now go on the website and with a few clicks access all of this information. I share your concerns, having served on the driving question that led to the formation of the Comparative Community Subcommittee was, why are we spending more than some of our comparative communities in terms of per pupil costs? So the multi-stakeholder group was born, called the Comparative Community Subcommittee, and we kind of mined that data and identified targeted areas that we wanted to look into. So what I would tell you how to think about this is that it's a great tool for identifying a question, but it doesn't tell you the story behind the number. It just gives you the number. And it's really our job to find the story behind the number. These budgets from town to town are very different and very complex. And what I came away with was a deeper understanding of how municipal and regional finance works, but you cannot draw conclusions based on the number. You have to find out the story that gave rise to that number. Okay.
How do you plan to collect the initiative from us or from the community about this clear? Because, the data, because we use the data to actually to find probably to reveal a question and then to guide our policy, right, change. So how do you plan to gather those?
I think we're so early in the process, I don't know how to answer the question. I mean, I've given you this, whet your appetite this much, I've dipped one toe into the water.
So you will see one of the charts off of this website on February 8th when I present my report of entry findings, and I'm not going to tell you which chart it is or why I'm using it, but I promise you will see it. It's in there.
I know which chart it is, and I made sure I did not have Beth put it up tonight. Thank you.
Okay, item 9 is a school building project update.
I think Peter did a fine job, and I would just note that the website has all of our information. So if you need anything, it's there. If you have any questions, let me know.
Can I give one additional piece? Just also on that, we had a discussion, and obviously we did end up voting for the Gate site as the preferred site option. There was a little bit of discussion at the end about the possibility of a riverbed setback being 200 feet in a no-build zone. We actually met with the architect today, who was able to confirm through Epsilon Associates, which is the environmental consulting firm, it is not a 200-foot no-build zone. It's a 200-foot notification zone and a 100-foot no-build zone. So that actually was one of the larger areas of concern last night. It was probably the only area of real concern. So we were able to go back today, confirm that information, and the architect's continuing to work through.
Okay, thank you, Mary. A few more items to get through. Item 10 is school committee meeting calendar. There are 2 adjustments to the school committee meeting calendar that I want to draw your attention to this evening. The first one is I would like to recommend moving the budget hearing date to February 7th. The budget hearing would be prior to a school committee business meeting that's already scheduled. The budget hearing is currently scheduled prior to our meeting the following week on the 13th. This gives the district a week to make any last-minute adjustments if needed in case we don't vote the preliminary budget on the same day that the budget hearing is. And for those of you who need a little bit of background, the budget hearing is an annual required hearing, and it gives the public an opportunity to weigh in on the budget before we vote. The Mass General Law, Chapter 7134, requires that we put a notice in the paper, that we make a copy available for public scrutiny, and based on that feedback, we might want to make adjustment to the budget, and we might not want to vote. So for that reason, I'd like to suggest moving the budget hearing to February 7th. Are there any objections to that? Paul?
Is that okay with the senior leadership team? Okay.
Okay, so noted, so that change will be made. The second scheduled change is looking ahead to June. I would like to float the idea of canceling both our June 6th and our June 20th business meeting and to consolidate the business into one business meeting in June on June 13th. June 6th is the night before graduation. June 20th is a district retirement party. The last day of school is the 18th if we have no snow days, the 25th if we have 5. I would like to avoid meeting close to the last day of school. So I wanted to see if there are any objections to making those modifications to the schedule and having just one meeting in June on the 13th. Any objections to that? I'm getting the thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Okay, and so there are 2 more items, and they have to do with workshops. I'd like to get 2 workshops on the calendar. One is a March workshop. Superintendent Light and I have been throwing around the idea of having a March workshop to discuss his entry plan findings, which he will present to us in February. And this workshop, potentially, would give us an opportunity to talk more in depth than we normally are able to do in a business meeting about the entry plan and its implications for goal setting for the district going forward. No date has set. This would be a public meeting as usual, probably a couple hours, an evening meeting, similar to a business meeting, but with one agenda item, the entry plan. So sometime in March. I don't have a date yet, but we're working on it. I wanted to just let you know that we're thinking about this and we'd like to do something about it, so. This would not be in lieu of any meetings we have planned for March. This would be in addition to the calendar. Yes, it would be in addition to the calendar, yes. Okay, so no strong objections to that. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. And the last, actually there's 1.5 more things. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a summer workshop in June. The school committee has an opportunity that I would love for us to take advantage of for the summer workshop, and that is to participate in the SEED program, the Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity program that is currently one of our district goals. Okay, our district goal is by August 2019 to have 9 employees here trained in the trainer workshops, and to actually have 10% of all our certified staff receive the SEED training, and to be part of that would be just wonderful. It's a 15-hour program, and it would be an overnight commitment, and I know this is a big ask, but there is a space at Endicott College in Beverly on, did I even write the dates down? I believe is it June 26th and 27th? And that is a Wednesday, and then going into the Thursday. So it's a big ask, but I'm going to really strongly push for this. It's just a wonderful opportunity. I think, look, strong commitment and a commitment to team development are 2 features of successful school boards. I think it would really be very powerfully impactful in that way. And I just think this is one of the single most important things we could do. The SEED training could inform our future deliberations on decision-making on many educational issues that are upcoming. So if I could get just some feedback from you, if you think that you could do this, I know it's a big ask. So.
What if people get kind of the general feeling about doing it, and then they could look at their calendar and confirm with Beth?
Okay. So what is your initial impression about participating in something like this, Maya and then Tessa?
I've heard such great things about it, about the program and the training from staff. I'd be very interested in going. It's hard to manage an overnight, but I would do my best to attend.
I think that one of the hardest things about being on school committee is that it feels sometimes like you have to know everything, and if you're not in education or haven't been in education, that's a big ask. And I think the opportunity for professional development, I mean, when we went to the MASC conference, like just the idea of professional development, I think adds a lot to the experience of being a school committee member. And from everything I've heard about the SEED training, I'd be very excited to participate.
Oh, Paul.
I would be interested in doing it if it's logistics. So this is an overnight, and it's both days, full days?
Well, 15 hours, I'm assuming it's about a day and a half.
Yeah, okay. But is the overnight component a mandatory piece? Or is that something we can just commute in the morning and come back in the evening? Or is there something happening in the evening that we have to attend?
I don't know. Do you have any idea of what the training? We'd have to look into it, I suppose, and get back to you on that as a potential option. But, thanks for bringing that up. Yep.
Possibly. So it really is 2 full days.
It is 2 full days?
It's 15 hours of training.
Okay.
You could potentially come back at night, but it's over an hour away.
Okay, so
And
it
I
does
think
kind
the
of
idea
end
was
at a reasonable hour and then
Team-
it doesn't, okay. Okay.
But I think you could.
Okay, terrific. So we will move forward with this. If you could just email me to let me know if you definitely are in, or if you really are out, or if you need to really be able to commute, that would be really helpful, and then we could move forward with this. I'm very excited that there's. Yeah. And copy Beth, please, for sure, yeah. Thank you. There was a business meeting listed as 10.4. We usually one business meeting in the summer. It's scheduled for Thursday, August 22nd. I know that, Tessa, you can't make that. Is there anyone else who wouldn't be able to come to a business meeting the last week in August? Okay. And Amy. So that's 3. Right, on the 28th, right. So maybe we should revisit that as well and find some dates where that we can have the full committee in attendance. Okay. Okay, moving on to item 11. We have a recommendation to approve a donation from the Friends of the Acton Libraries to the district libraries. Do you want to speak more about that? I can provide detail as well.
Sure, this is just a very generous donation, and I believe it's an annual donation that the Friends of Acton Libraries donate. They're donating $13,000 to the various school libraries. This is very, very significant. It goes a long way to each of our schools. The specific donation is for Acton-Boxborough Regional High School is $2,700. Acton-Boxborough Regional Junior High School is $1,900, and then each elementary school is $1,400. So a huge donation. We're very, very appreciative of all the work that the volunteers do to be able to bring this opportunity to our kids.
Do I hear a motion to accept? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Any abstentions, I should ask, actually. Motion passes. Okay, we're moving on to subcommittee member reports, and we do need to vote a policy this evening, but I'm going to hand it over to you, Amy, for an update.
So policy was not able to meet, so I don't have anything to report for policy. So skip those.
So there's a second read on here for the bus behavior expectations. Can we move forward with that?
Okay. I thought that, okay, yeah, all right, sure. I'm sorry, I thought that we needed to meet once to discuss something, but.
So I think there are 2 policies here. One is a staff recruitment selection and appointment.
No, I know what she's talking. You guys know, right? So the rest of the committee is telling me that the last meeting that we had, we didn't need to do a follow-up. For some reason, I thought we were going to.
We did a first read on the bus behaviors.
Yes, but I thought there were some changes that we needed to then come back and. Okay, all right, I'm sorry. Then, yes, we're looking for a vote. Do you want to speak to that? The changes? Marie? Sorry.
Sure, I was prepared to talk about the other one, but
I have it right here if you need. You want me to? I read it. Do you want it? It's just the school bus behavior.
Yep, so really it was just clarification of language and making it more readable. There weren't any real changes. Diane had made some recommendations that we adopted. Does anyone have any? You read it in your packet, right? Any?
Are there any further comments or changes to the policy?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously.
And I apologize again for not being up on that.
And I can do the next policy if you want. Okay, so the policy on staff recruitment, selection, and appointment, the goal of the changes is to make it very clear exactly what it means. There's been confusion over time. It wasn't specific enough, and so the title before was professional staff, and there was always a question as to, does it just mean for teaching and administrative positions, or does it mean all positions? So we really wanted to clarify things. We also updated some of the language around qualifications and what we're looking for. The prior policy said that family members of principals and central office administrators, that applications of family members will not be considered. We made it much more clear, and the term central office administrators is not very clear. So there are administrators throughout the district that never knew if it applied to them or didn't apply to them. So after talking through it with the policy subcommittee, we agreed that it would be family members of the superintendent and the assistant superintendents and the principals. So it's clear to whom it's referring. And then we defined family members as it's defined in the law related to the ethics laws, because it relates to that. Years ago, the policy also said that applications from family members of school committee would not be considered, and that got taken out at one point, and we put it back in here. So that while you're serving on the school committee, your immediate family members as defined in the ethics laws, cannot apply for positions in the school district. And then the only exception is part-time positions within community education. And the thinking around that is students, children who are attending the high school and might have an opportunity to be a lifeguard or work at camp or something like that, that would be an appropriate employment. But that spouses and that kind of thing being hired into positions. And it's thinking about how the hiring manager would feel in that situation and that kind of thing. So that's our recommendation. It's a first read. We're happy to have feedback.
Paul?
I'll move to approve.
Well, so this is a first read.
I'm sorry. I'm good with it.
So anybody with any feedback, that feedback should be directed to whom? Amy? Or, yes. Okay. Yes? Okay. Okay, moving on to, I know Adam is not here to give a capital improvement committee update. I was not at the last meeting. Do you mind?
Sure.
Okay.
So I think Capital Committee met last night. It feels like about a week ago. It's been a long 24 hours, but Capital Committee met last night. We received from Skanska a draft of the capital plan, and we're currently working through that because the categorizations actually completed all of the work in the first 3 years of the plan rather than over 12 years. So JD and I and Dave and Marie are going to be meeting and talking through how we can allocate that into the 12 years. We will have that ready for Budget Saturday, and I expect that to be a much longer discussion during Budget Saturday. The total dollar value of the work right now is around $23 million, which we had planned around 20. So we need to take a look at some of the costs. There are likely opportunities to apply and submit a statement of interest to the MSBA for the accelerated repair program. We're targeting, there's some bundles of work that we can do at Blanchard that would qualify for the accelerated repair program. There's also some at a couple of the other schools, including the junior high school. So if we were accepted into that program, we could actually be reimbursed. I'm not exactly sure of the rate. It would be similar to what we reimbursed for the building project, but that would actually allow us to stretch the dollars that we're putting into the capital plan even further and complete more of the work. So I think that might be a strategy we want to explore. We anticipate that we would be bringing to you those statements of interest for your approval and authorization at the February 8th meeting, so that February 7th meeting, I keep saying the 8th, February 7th meeting, so that we could move that forward to MSBA.
Does that 23 million include anything, work at Conant?
It does not. There's a very large strategic decision on the horizon with regard to what we want to do with Conant that I think is going to be a bigger topic of discussion. There are a number of options that we started to discuss around Conant yesterday. One would be if we want to stretch out, if we want to, we'll continue to submit annually a statement of interest for Conant for the core program, which is the program that Douglas is under right now. However, MSBA has not ever, to my knowledge, approved a district to do two programs at the same time. So we would actually have to complete the Douglas project fully, and then we might get accepted into that next pipeline to begin Conant. So we'd really probably be looking, 7 to 10 years until completion of Conant. If we wanted to go that route. Another possibility is to consider scaling back what we might want to do for Conant. Maybe we don't want to rebuild Conant as a new school, and instead we want to submit to MSBA and see if we could negotiate with them around a scaled renovation of the building as the only option that we're interested in. So that might be a strategy we want to employ. We also talked about, is it something we want to do an accelerated repair program and also just maybe code upgrades? But we don't want to do accelerated repair if we're going to then renovate the building, because we would not qualify for reimbursement on all of those costs. So it's really a bigger strategy. And then based on the decisions around that I think the group needs to make, and probably the committee needs to make, we would then be able to talk about how we would, if we wanted to go forward with this current strategy, which is to apply to the core program, then I think we would talk about what are the very small repairs that we can continue to make, and certainly make sure the educational opportunities are there for kids over the next 7 to 10 years. Sure.
Paul?
Weren't we planning, as the subcommittee, planning to meet one more time to kind of flesh that out?
Yeah, we are meeting one more time.
Okay. Amy, Budget Subcommittee has met. Can you give a quick update?
So I feel like we've gotten a really good update. Everything pretty much that we talked about today, we did at Budget Subcommittee. So I don't really have anything else to add, except we got a little bit more detail about the, I looked at Dave, I'm sorry. ClearGov.
Yes.
Maybe we saw Peter's slide, I don't know.
We might have. I'll have to think about that.
Any liaison updates? I know CPAC liaisons were busy. Do you mind?
Speak to that? Yeah, there's a fair bit of communication between the district and the CPAC on strategic hires and that kind of thing. I can't recall anything else. That's kind of the gist of that.
Okay. And I know, Tessa, the PTSO roundtable met?
We did. We updated them. There was not a lot of questions or anything, really. I can't even remember now. That was this week too, right?
Yes, it was. And then we hadn't, the roundtable hasn't met for a month, so I think mostly updates.
It was mostly updates from us, filling them in.
Okay, any other liaisons want to report out? Yep.
This was a couple of meetings ago, but they had up for discussion how we allocate the tax basis and whether to shift more to industry and commercial. But the decision was to keep it with kind of loaded on residential. And just recently, if I heard it correctly, Katie and Janet will be stepping down, so there'll be open positions.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Our next meeting is Budget Saturday. And budget binders will be out, I want to say the 17th. Is that correct? Beth, do you know? The 18th? Friday, the 18th, okay. All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn? All in favor? All right, good night, all.